All right, so we'll get started. Today's webinar, I think, is actually an extremely important webinar because, I've been talking to attorneys for 25 years, like multiple attorneys every day for, longest period of time. And there's just a lot of things that it actually starts in law school, but a lot of things in terms of the way that attorneys think, the way that the pressure of the profession, the people that are around them, the people that are in other firms that really tend to cause like a lot of very serious problems with people, and it makes them unhappy practicing law. It can lead to health problems, getting disbarred, like all sorts of things that wouldn't be happening were they not be practicing law. So today, what I'm talking about is basically what that is, how to avoid it, and how to have self-confidence in what you're doing, and to feel better about yourself, regardless of what's happening in your career. And people go through all sorts of struggles. There's a lot of rejection in the legal profession, meaning you could apply to 100 jobs and maybe get an interview at one of them. That can be very upsetting. There's a lot of people have problems when they're in their jobs. Most attorneys get fired at one point or another. It's pretty common that people get fired, whether it's a partner or an associate. People have periods of unemployment where they doubt themselves. People are surrounded by people that are more successful than them and constantly reminded of it. People go up against firms with better qualified attorneys, and they feel inferior to them. There's all sorts of things that happen in terms of the way that attorneys think about their jobs, and the pressures that they feel, even from I guess it would be just class stratification in the legal profession. And what that essentially does is it gives people a feeling that they're never good enough, and that that there's something wrong with them, and they feel badly about themselves. Some people start feeling badly about themselves when they're in law school, and then they feel badly about themselves throughout their entire career. And then they feel, that they're basically shackled to law firms and there's nothing they can do. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. What I think is very interesting are there are certain characteristics of people that tend to be very happy in the legal profession, and they don't really care what other people are doing. They find a way to be happy and not to be comparing themselves to others, and all sorts of stuff that can really hold you back. The one thing I would just say at the start is I have a lot of interest in sociology and different things that kind of relate to that. And primarily, when you're practicing law, it's a middle class profession. I mean, you're basically working for other people, regardless of what kind of status you are, whether or not you're a partner or an associate, and you're dependent on those other people thinking highly of you. And it could be because of your academic qualifications or where you worked. And the higher people think of you, then obviously the more you feel like you're succeeding. And you don't see that in a lot of other professions. They always say that this is just kind of an interesting fact that the use of like hard drugs like cocaine and stuff usually starts with the upper class, avoids like the middle class more, and then lower class, and both of them tend not to care, the upper class and the lower class, whereas the middle class is always concerned about what other people think of them, and that sort of thing, and that can cause a lot of issues. So I'll be talking about that today, and we'll go into a lot of detail about that. This is also a live webinar, so at the end of the webinar, we'll take a short break for like 1 or 2 minutes, and then when I come back, we'll answer questions about anything you have related to this webinar, or anything unrelated to the webinar, and we'll stay as long as it takes to ask the question. So during the webinar, I'd encourage you to take notes, and also if you think of questions you'd like to ask, you can put those in the chat, and then we will answer them after. So, there's a lot of, costs that are involved in being an attorney that typically aren't in all other professions. And there's a lot of pressure to achieve and to do well, both for yourself and for clients and for the people that you're working for in law firms or wherever you're working. There's a huge obsession among a lot of attorneys, most attorneys, for status. and also validation from judges, from clients, from their firms, from the market. And because of all this, what happens is a lot of people end up sabotaging their careers and their lives. And I mean, this is a very serious issue. I mean, and so I'm going to, explore today, like what people do, how they tend to sabotage themselves, and it happens with so many attorneys, and how this happens, how to break free of the cycle. I was just thinking, I mean, just before I got on this call, I was talking to a partner in a large law firm that makes a lot of money, and just a complete sense of, doubt and feeling badly about himself. And, so this can happen at attorneys at all levels of the career. So we talked to you a little bit about what a lot of attorneys do. The majority of them that are in law firms, they chase status. And so I have two friends that died not too long ago. One committed suicide after getting disbarred for embezzling money from a client. And he was someone that had been, chasing success and trying to do well and concerned about how he looked to others for as long as I had known him. And he'd worked at several law firms in, Miami and then a few other places. After law school, he was very obsessed with being rich or looking rich and successful and someone important. At the last high school reunion that I was at, he had gone around telling anyone who would listen that he developed some sort of app and sold it for hundreds of millions of dollars. And it wasn't true, but he wanted to be seen as everyone as rich and important, which probably for him was more important than even connecting with friends. He just wanted to be seen that way. And his identity and, he wanted to be seen in that way. And he was trapped in this cycle, and he'd been for a long time of trying to look good of others and feel good about himself. His mother was from a very wealthy family in Michigan, and his father was a well-known attorney, and his mother had moved down to Florida and had become a drug addict, and so she had given this Richard to his grandparents to raise because she couldn't do it, and this wealthy grandparents sent him to the boarding school that I attended, and the school that I went to was there. I mean, it was a lot of high achievers there. I was friends with him, and then in 10th grade, he was skipping class and showed up in one of my classes and asked me to come out and told me he had some cocaine that I could go use with him. And he always had kind of a, endless variety of girls coming out of his dorm. And, but I wasn't nearly as wild as he was. And, but he always was an okay student and motivated, and really wanted to do well in school and be successful. He wanted cars, houses, and things that a lot of people want, and he was surrounded by others that wanted these and to go to good schools and that sort of stuff as well. So he called me when he was looking for a position. He wasn't someone that I could help because he had too many firms on his background and long periods of unemployment. And I referred him to this website, Law Crossing, that our company runs, and their site just basically goes to law firm and company websites and finds jobs that aren't like on LinkedIn and Indeed and stuff, and then posts them there. He'd gone on the site and gotten all these different job offers when he'd been unemployed, and was, wrote me this long glowing recommendation that I lost. And at some point I thought maybe I should use that on the site, because it was good recommendation. Couldn't find it, but I looked him up, and the only thing I could find was an announcement that he'd been disbarred in Michigan, and that he had some charges pending in Florida or something. And then I searched for his information on the state bar website and said he was dead. And I found an announcement that he died the day he was disbarred. And so, I asked several of his high school friends, like these people that he had been around, known, and had gone around talking about how he'd sold this out for hundreds of millions of dollars. And, no one knew this. I mean, I guess the family, had, kept it secret, and he, had basically died without anyone knowing. And everything when I ever talked to him was always about money, status, where other people were living, what jobs he had had, and what other people, were doing. And and anyone he spoke to, he would basically talk about how he was doing better than them if they said something. So I think that what ultimately killed him was constantly chasing shiny objects, which a lot of us do. He wanted success and was constantly driven by trying to look successful and be successful because that was filling some sort of void inside him. And and I don't know why he had that void, but he felt like he had something to prove to others. And he wanted he spent his life doing that. And it looked to me like he just kept doing that until he got disbarred and then ended up killing himself. So people, all sorts of things happen to attorneys. I mean, attorneys get disbarred. I've seen a lot of attorneys get disbarred and just go off and feel terrible about themselves and have issues. And practicing law is not really when it comes down to it, it's not that important that it should define your whole identity. It's not really the most important thing in your identity. A lot of attorneys, their identity is wrapped up with being attorneys and how others see you and outward signs of success. But I don't know, and I would just submit to you, being a lawyer is very important. But if you wrap your whole self-identity, and I'm going to talk about the ways that people do that, it's not really as important, that you think. I mean, stealing $15,000 of a client. I mean, I don't know why someone would do that, but he did. And he just kept chasing success and moving to different law firms and, trying to just chase success like this. And it's something that a lot of attorneys will do throughout their career. And it's even more prevalent in large competitive cities where jobs are hard to get. I mean, New York's a perfect example. And I think that attorneys like in that market, for example, are much less content by far than people working in smaller markets and smaller firms where there's not so much of that. So I think that I think that attorneys die much earlier than their counterparts in smaller firms around the country. I was having dinner with a partner that I know from the first firm I worked at, Quinn Emanuel, and he was telling me about the people that he knew there that had died, and I don't think they would have died, had they not been working 100+ hour weeks for a decade or more. I don't think that would have happened. So these are just things to think about. I mean, this complete pushing yourself like so far, needing to impress the firm you're working at, needing to do all this, can really hurt you. I remember I was working with one attorney that became a partner at a large law firm in New York, and he took some time off to go visit his parents for Christmas in Florida. And he flew down there and walked in the door, and he was someone that worked like incredible hours and died. And he was like, in his early 40s and just had a heart attack. I mean, and again, I don't think that would have happened had he not been, chasing all this. So regardless of, how successful you are in the practice of law right now, I would have observed that often the best attorneys, like the people that look the best on paper and are working at the largest firms, are often the unhappiest. They tend to leave and try to go in house. They're constantly complaining, and again, it's not all of them, but I would say it's more than half. And what's interesting to me is when attorneys go to work in smaller markets, and I actually have fun. I talk to attorneys in smaller markets several times a week. They typically will not have the best credentials. They could have gone to University of Idaho Law School or something. They're working in smaller firms, and they're not making anywhere near what attorneys would in larger firms. They're not doing anywhere near work that's as sophisticated, but they're actually, I think, the happiest. And when you look at their resumes, it's kind of fun because they'll talk about leading these groups, whether it's playing softball, volunteering, living in areas where their families close by, and they actually seem much happier than attorneys that are in the most competitive jobs, and they're enjoying what they do. They don't feel the pressure and being surrounded by people that have these incredible qualifications. They just actually feel content about what they're doing. And when you look at your choices that you make in your career, you're actually in control of your life. You're in control of where you want to live. You're in control of where you want to work. You're in control of the people that you associate with. I mean, you are making decisions every day about if you're going to be happy or not, and what's important to you. People will do things like they'll rent a house or apartment, or they'll buy something, or they'll get married, or they won't get married, or they'll save money or they won't save money, or they'll travel and they won't travel. And you have just an incredible number of choices you can make. And with those abilities, you would think that you would be making, especially if you're really smart, the choices that would make you happiest. But people, especially in the legal profession, will often make decisions that don't make them happy, and this is a big problem. I mean, most of them do. So, you may make a decision to buy a car, house, or something else that's more than you can afford, which is what a lot of people do, and then they have fights in relationships about money. Or, an example would be when you work in a law firm. Law firms love it when other attorneys are buying expensive homes, having children, have a spouse at home, or and so forth, because when they do that, the attorney is basically creating a situation where they have to work hard and continually work, and they're more likely to be stable. And so the law firms like that. They have to work hard. They can't. They know that if they don't, that they're going to lose a house, and they'll risk losing their jobs. So they're typically, if you put yourself in the law firm shoes, if you get all these obligations, you're a much better person to hire, because you don't want to risk that. And all sorts of things like stay-at-home spouses and expensive schools and things will all box you in if you're an attorney. And it's even more prevalent in large cities. They want to live in certain neighborhoods that are considered good places to live. They'll want to drive nice cars and send kids to school, and do what they can to look strong and feel good about themselves based on these sort of outside things. And when you're in that position, and it's just talking about spending money and so forth, you are very dependent on the law firm. So if the law firm doesn't like you, or the law firm's work slows down, or whatever happens, you're in trouble. So law firms can demand that you work long hours. They can, for partners, they can demand that they bring more and more business, and you become sort of imprisoned into this reality, and you're imprisoning yourself by these financial choices. It's very common. One thing I see a lot of is, but senior associates will be at large law firms. They'll work extremely hard and do a really good job, and they might be like a very small percentage of people. Like, there might be 50 people that start out there in their first year, and then by the time they're 10th year and they make partner, there might only be two other people that do that, and so they become partners, and then they typically will become like income partners, not equity partners, and then they're given a certain length of time to develop business. Some of them do, some of them don't. The ones that don't are often asked to leave. And then when they're asked to leave, then they have a certain runway to find a new job. They don't often find jobs right away. And if they don't find jobs, or they have to move to a position that doesn't pay as much, and they have a stay-at-home spouse, they often get divorced, which is very common. So you reach this kind of point of being a very, very high achiever, and then you end up, getting divorced and having all these problems. And so, you don't, law firms become, for a lot of people, a jailer. Like, people may not need to commute very long to work, or, work these incredible hours. And the law firm essentially has control over them. They have control over their time. They have control over their minds. They have control over their relationships. They have control over their ability to, pay for expenses and things that they need, that they have to pay. And so, when you indebt yourself to others, whether it's people you're paying money to, you have to, you're also bound, to work, and people that are working these kind of hours, it's very, very common for them to get divorced quite often. In fact, if you're in a law firm and you're working these incredible hours and you do so as an associate and as a partner, the odds are really, really good that you'll get divorced. When I was at Quinn Emanuel, which was my first job, I think all of the partners there had been divorced. I mean, it just kind of comes with the territory. How can you possibly have a good relationship with someone if you're never there, and then when you're home, you're stressed out and not pleasant to be around, and that's just what happens. And so, when attorneys are young, often, and they look like they're on the way up and they're doing really well, and they're able to attract nice mates and so forth. They're able to do that because they look like very good catches, but they never are able to eventually nourish a marriage. And one partner gets lonely. People feel neglected. All sorts of problems happen, and the work becomes your life, and you're not living as well as you possibly could. So, a lot of attorneys are very unsatisfied. Many aren't. Some people are able to balance relationships and like their work, and aren't having issues doing it, and are able to do it. But a great number aren't. They're kind of chasing shiny objects. I mean, they're constantly trying to maybe work in a better firm, or believe that if they make some sort of change, things are going to be much happier, and they'll be happier than where they were. So, when I talk to attorneys, like, why are they looking for new firms? Some people will say, "Oh, the culture doesn't work for me. Like I don't like it. I'm not part of the in crowd there, and I want to go someplace where I'm going to be evaluated just on my work." Or they'll have issues with the work that they're getting or the hours, and they always believe that if they make some sort of change, it's going to be better. And this thing about chasing shiny objects, I mean, it happens like from the second you're applying to law school, that you want to go to the best law school possible, and that's the first shiny object. And then and most attorneys, when they go to law school, they have little idea, hardly any, of what they're doing in a law firm, or what what they'll be doing once they get there, what it's like working there. And all sorts of people go to law school. They could be poets, they could be math majors, scientists, and they have no idea of what they're getting into. They may have had a passion in something before they went to law school, but generally, a lot of times when they get into law firms, they no longer have that passion. They will, try to transfer sometimes after their first year if they didn't get into the best law school. Sometimes they'll enroll in law school not even knowing that it's important to go to a good law school. When they come out, not having gone to a good law school, they will often, and this is something I see a lot of, they'll enroll in LLM programs to have a good law firm, a good law school on their resume. LLM programs are typically not as difficult to get into as a law school. And when they're in law school, they'll be chasing grades and trying to get the best grades. Then they'll be trying to get the best summer jobs. And by the time they're at the end of their first year of law school, they realize that they're part of a whole class system where they're at some level of that class system, whether it's good or bad, and they know exactly where they're fitting in terms of the quality of firms and all that sort of thing. We had a recruiter here that is no longer with us, but she went to Harvard and was the very top of her class. And when she was looking for a job with other people that were like the top few students in her class, there were like literally only 5 law firms in all of New York that they would apply to. I mean, that's how special they believed they were, and how that kind of class system had developed. And if you are comparing yourself to others, someone else, is going to be at a better firm, and people will often try, to continually move up to a better firm, one that has a different culture, that's in a different part of the country, or a firm that does a certain type of work. So I was talking to a candidate yesterday who's at a firm called Gordon and Rees, and Gordon and Rees is I don't know, it's one of the 50 largest firms in the country or something, but they do mainly insurance defense. So he wants to move to another Am Law 100 law firm and is afraid of ever leaving there. But the firm is an Am Law 100 law firm because of the number of attorneys it has, not necessarily because of things like profit per partner and all that. So he's trying to move from there because he feels like he's inferior at this firm. So he wants to he's constantly been looking to try to get into better and better firms because he knows that there's a class system with large law firms, and he wants to be in one that has a better class system or with it that's considered a higher end firm. And so, attorneys get to firms, they will many times they'll buckle down, they'll try to do the absolute best they can, they'll try to do the best work they can, they'll try to work as many hours as they can. And then if they realize it's not going to be possible, they'll try to move to another firm where they get that title. Then firms will have other sorts of titles that also have a class system to them. There'll be equity partners and non-equity partners, and people will always feel that they're not successful if they're a non-equity partner and want to do that. And so this race for titles and for working in better firms and all this stuff is just constantly going on in the background. People are feeling inferior about themselves because they don't have the titles, they're not at the right firm, all sorts of things that they're constantly chasing to better and better. And then when you get into a law firm and you do make a partner or become a partner, then there's a whole chase to getting business and having a certain size book of business. So I talk to partners every day that don't have large books of business, and they are in a position where they feel very vulnerable. They feel like they're not doing a good job. They lack a lot of enthusiasm that you would think for people doing very well financially. And then partners in law firms will also compare their compensation to other people. So most of the people are not at the top of the list. And so they're constantly comparing themselves there. So people will try to move to better firms. People will try to get better titles. People will try to get more business. And so you're always, chasing something that you may not have, and always feeling like you're not doing well enough because of what you don't have. And so people will always feel that if they do something else, that, the grass is going to be greener there. And most people in the largest law firms, I would say, a good percentage of them, will try to, go in-house because they feel like that now I can escape billable hours, now all this sort of stuff. And then, when people go in-house, it's very, very dangerous because in-house jobs, and I'm not speaking of all of them, of course, but most of the time when I see an attorney who's gone in-house, maybe their first in-house job was 10 years ago, typically there'll be a lot of moves. There'll be periods of unemployment. And because when you're going to work in-house, which looks like a good opportunity from the outside, a lot of times, those in-house jobs are not stable because companies go out of business, or companies hire new CEOs who want their own legal department. Companies lay people off. And if you're an attorney in-house, you're a cost center, not a profit center. So there's all these things, that are, continually happening to attorneys' careers that don't give them any stability and always make them feel like they're on pins and needles. And it can be, pretty crazy. I mean, you will, often big legal departments will often, you'll be dependent on whether a general counsel or CEO likes them, or how the company's doing in their products and services and all this sort of stuff. And you probably know what's happening, of course, in the government right now, where every day I'm seeing, I just look at new candidates coming in, and there's just pages and pages of them from the government that are losing their jobs. So think about the security there. I mean, people used to think that was secure, and that's not good. So, it's just, it can happen just throughout your career, like a complete sense of insecurity, a complete sense you're not doing well enough, having jobs that just go away. And, there's nothing wrong with trying to do better and better. But a lot of times, you're in this position where you're unhappy because you don't have that, and you're often imprisoned financially. Like, imagine, some of these government attorneys I've been speaking with thought they had a lot of stability. They bought houses, and they also have had children and all these sort of things. And so, now they're in a position where they can't do that. And this whole idea of chasing shiny objects, like trying to do better and better, in your career, never stops. I mean, you can never, you're never really secure, and you're often people get in prison financially earlier in their careers, and and that can be very, very difficult. You're imprisoning yourself when you spend money and you get into financial commitments. Yourself. You're addicted often to money and status, and something else. People are buying new cars all the time. You're allowing yourself, to be imprisoned by that. So I had another friend, Daniel, and he died from drug-related issues after spending the majority of his adult life not doing much of anything. He used drugs. He was, heavily. He was drinking all the time and feeling sorry for himself. He came from a family of people that were very successful. They owned a large construction company in Michigan, and both of his brothers became very successful and went to good schools and that sort of thing. And Daniel was very fun to be friends with. But he drank too much and used drugs. And early on, he was motivated, I think, more by substances than doing well in school or really becoming much of anything. And early on, I think that he realized he didn't have the drive or the intelligence to do as well in school as most of the people he was with surrounded. He wasn't an athlete. He didn't really have any special skills, and so rather than trying to do those things, he kind of dropped out and didn't do the best he could. And he was surrounded when he graduated by kids that had done very, very well. Were going to top schools and all these sorts of things. And but he gave up because he didn't feel like he could compete. He never received the positive feedback from teachers because he never tried as hard as he could. So just imagine being surrounded by all your peers that are doing really well, and your family doing very well, and your friends doing very well, and how that would make you feel about yourself. And so, what do people do when they're in that situation? They become different types of people. He became someone that was doing pranks and stuff all the time. But he was also someone who was, very talented and likable, and had skills, but he wasn't ever able to tap into them because he had so much negative feedback. He was never able to feel good about himself. So what did he do? A lot of people in that situation will try to develop identities. So he followed the Grateful Dead. He started growing a beard and wearing tie-dye things and acting like a hippie because that's where he felt like he could find acceptance. I mean, you may know people that go into other things, whether they start teaching yoga or get into spiritual things or different groups that where they don't have much going on. They do that so they can feel a sense of connection and achievement. But there are lots of attorneys that go into very competitive law firms, and they shouldn't be there. I mean, they don't have that drive to work hard. They're in firms that demand, you turn in work that's perfect and doesn't have errors in it. They're very competitive. They're dealing with people, and it's like this in all law firms that are trying to undermine you and kind of make themselves look better. This happens just as much with partners as it happens with associates. And, I see attorneys all the time that enter the profession and they get into decent firms, and then after a few years their spirits are crushed by not being able to keep up with people, not being able to survive in these environments, and many attach their self-worth to working in these sorts of firms. I had a can I was working with recently. He was in North Carolina, and he'd been at a major law firm doing real estate, and he got it after going to a really good school. And they sat him down like about a year after he'd been there, and they said, you just don't have the drive of other people here. Like you don't have, you're not, putting yourself all into this. You're not all in. And when that happened, he eventually ended up losing his job. He started looking for jobs, and he was having a very hard time because he would go in and not look like someone that had a lot of drive. He was probably someone that did at one point, but he was surrounded in this law firm by people that were much more competitive than him, and that made him feel badly about himself. And so he ended up not getting anything, and then became a contract attorney doing document review at another large law firm. And I know he must felt terrible about himself because he's comparing himself to these people that went to his top 10 law school and not doing well, and just not happy at all. I had another candidate like him too that was also in North Carolina, and this was kind of interesting. He'd been at a major law firm, and again had lost his job, and I managed to get him a job in another really good law firm. He was a real estate attorney, and I was very happy for him because he could continue practicing this branch of real estate finance at another law firm, and I felt like I'd saved his career. He was like about 3 years out of law school, and he got this job, and then he decided he wasn't going to take it because his friend was starting some sort of litigation firm that he didn't really have any clients for yet. And he thought that, rather than going into a competitive environment and failing, he would go into this job. And maybe that was a good decision for him. But a lot of people, had he started out at a smaller law firm without so many competitive people and that would making him feel inferior, I'm pretty confident that he would probably still be practicing law. And, so people, are in very competitive environments, and for some people it makes sense to them. But if you're typically have very few choices. If you're in a really competitive environment, you can try to pick up your game and compete with people that may be smarter than you or more motivated than you to compete, where you kind of know you're never going to succeed at the level. Or your other option is to compete in a less competitive area of the country or less competitive practice area. And then the third is to drop out completely. So this is like the three options that you have. You have your choice of which one you want to choose. In my opinion, the smartest move most people can make is to go into a less competitive environment where you're happier. That can be even starting your own law firm. It can be all sorts of things, or going to a law firm where you're going to feel more comfortable, or the mistake that often the most talented people make. And I'm told you one example already is to drop out completely, and that's something that a lot of people do. I had a woman not too long ago that her husband moved to Rochester, New York, and she'd been at a major firm and needed to move with him for whatever reason. And when when I worked with her, I got her two positions in Rochester with good firms in Rochester, and she was like, thinking about these offers. And then one day she called me and said, "I'm not going to take these offers because I'm worried. I'm embarrassed about having to work at a smaller law firm like this when all my friends in New York are still working at these big firms." So she literally decided to drop out of practicing law rather than stay practicing. And this is a decision that a lot of people make, which is very sad. I mean, they drop out because they're kind of shell shocked. They can be shell shocked by getting fired. They can be shell shocked by whatever happened to them in a large law firm in terms of the workload. And it's something I see all the time. I see people. I've even seen people. I saw one woman. I might have talked about this in the webinar last week, but there was one woman at a firm that I worked at that had a horrible experience working with this female partner that was very, very demanding. And so she quit her job and became a waitress, and she'd gone to like Columbia Law School. And I see this sort of thing all the time. I see people that are otherwise very, very talented that get into these environments that just crush their spirit. And because of that, they feel like they can't practice law. When the fact is, I mean, there's 30,000 plus law firms in the United States, and there's places where you can be happy. And but most people, a lot of times, they have experiences where they don't do that. So this friend of mine, Daniel, he just completely dropped out of life. He started following the Grateful Dead and giving himself reasons not to compete. And then he started going to a series of colleges. He'd always try to go back to a some community college or something, switched jobs, switched geographic locations, and never had any stability, completely gave up. And it ended up killing him, I think. And it's the same thing with attorneys. Like, they will often give up. They'll give up. You can give up in a lot of different ways. You can give up by actually giving up and stopping practicing law, or your spirit can be so crushed that you will completely give up. And that's very sad as well. People will lose their motivation to make them, to make the most of themselves, because they feel that keeping going is just too difficult. They're just not up for it. I had a sad thing happen too. It was recently with an attorney that again went to a really good law school, and he went to a very good firm in Delaware and failed the bar twice, and then lost his job because of that, and then took the bar the third time and passed. And then I came to me looking for a job, and I got him a job in a small law firm in Maryland, where he was actually working with a partner that had been a partner at a Am Law 100 law firm, like a very successful partner. And it was a really good opportunity for him to do well in his career. But and when he was interviewing with this partner, he was very nervous, and he was just shaking basically. And the guy called me, and I said, well, this is a really good opportunity for him. Doesn't have a lot of opportunities because of what happened, but he's going to get there, and he's going to feel grateful, and he's going to work as hard as he can and do the best work he possibly can. And so he hired him. But when he got there, because of everything that happened to him, his spirit, his motivation was just so low that he ended up, losing his job. And so he's no longer practicing law. I had another woman that, I could tell these stories all day, but I had another woman that was very, very, did very, very well in Harvard Law School. And then she got into an extremely competitive firm. She'd had some drug issues in the past, and within 6 months, she was back on drugs and ended up losing her job because she just couldn't keep up with the pressure, and it was just too difficult for her. And then she didn't practice law for several years, after that happened. So, a lot of people will quit large law firms often because they find them too competitive. But when I see people often go to smaller firms in smaller cities, I see them having often much more fulfilling and rewarding careers if they're able to do that. And they many people just believe that if they can't compete at the highest level possible, or based on things that have happened to them, they should give up. So my friend Daniel, he, in my opinion, would probably still be alive and have a good career if he hadn't been so demoralized around comparing himself to people that were around him and feeling like he just needed to drop out. He probably shouldn't have been in a really competitive school. His family probably should have supported him doing whatever he wanted to do, whether it was being an artist or I don't know. But he was constantly in a position where he felt unsuccessful. And by the time, everyone from high school was in their mid-20s, they were in, medical school and law school and business school. And, when he died, he was living, with his brother and family in Florida, basically, in a back room where he was drinking and using drugs and not taking care of himself. The last time I saw him, he seemed just a complete mess. And, these two people that I'm telling you about were surrounded by just all this pressure, these people that were aggressively chasing success. And the one failed and killed himself, and then the other, gave up and eventually died of alcoholism, which I didn't even know you could, but I guess you could. So, it's sad, and it's sad when you're trying to compare yourself to other people all the time and never feeling like you're enough. So here's how people trap themselves in unhappiness and financial obligations. And I can tell you this from personal experience, like the things that I've done, trying to keep up with other people and trying to just look like I'm a very successful person or feel successful. Around 15 years ago, it was maybe a little bit more than that, I purchased this huge 9,000 square foot house in a very nice neighborhood. It was probably the largest house in the neighborhood. It had 9-foot walls. It was a huge lot, like in a very expensive area. It had a koi pond, aquarium that was so large it had its own room for it. It had a tennis court, like probably the largest pool in Pasadena, California, where it was. Murals that had been painted on the ceilings by uh, Italian painters that the previous owners brought in. And I'd always driven by this home before I bought it and wondered, who would possibly, live in a house like this? This was just incredible. And then I was in a position where I actually bought it, and it was just my new wife and myself, just two people. And there's absolutely no reason for someone like me, to be living in that house. And it was a complete waste of money financially and otherwise. And then, the day I moved into this home, I remember thinking that, once I got to a house like this, I would be satisfied to some extent. But I started, I got there and I actually felt very, very depressed. And I didn't even know why I was so depressed, but I realized, I was depressed because in purchasing this house, I thought that it would make me happier, fulfill something inside. But then I got there and I realized it did absolutely nothing. And I realized, I'd been working all these years just in college and law school and in law firms and my businesses, and that, all of this work had presumably been done to have something like this. And it didn't mean anything to me when I got there. And then I just kind of like, well, what else is there? Why am I not, happy? And, I had a huge mortgage payment, top property tax payments, and, I guess I had something to prove to myself and maybe to others. I was very successful at that time. I had just businesses that weren't all related to recruiting. And, I've been purchasing buildings and warehouses and other things that I really didn't need, that also boxed me in financially, that made me feel, that I thought would make me feel successful. And, there's a financial crisis hit. I ended up selling the house to this famous producer, Gail Hurd. She did like the Hurt Locker and all these movies. And then I actually purchased an even more expensive house in Malibu. And it was also something that I didn't need. I worked really hard when I was in college, so I'd go to a good law school. Then I worked really hard in law school so I could get into a good firm. Then I, worked really, really hard when I was in a law firm so I could become a partner. And what I realized is that, when I was in a law firm, I was putting myself into a position that was risky because, you don't know what's going to happen. And I wanted control over my career and my compensation. So I started this business and others because I felt that there would be better rewards if I put all my energy into that. And, and if your energy goes towards things that make you stronger, then it's going to make, those around us stronger. So, but, when people, many people try to do the best they can to do to look successful and to feel successful. And you're doing it, as long as you can. And most attorneys are, caught up in this game where they're just chasing these shiny objects, and to feel better, to do better, to get more business, to get titles, to work in better firms. And, they're often don't feel a lot of, satisfaction for what they currently have. They are always thinking like, what could I have, instead of living in the present. And, because you're fascinated with trying to look good to others and do well and be highly regarded, you're also putting yourself in a position where employers are smart enough that they know they can take advantage of you. People that you're working for can take advantage of you. People that you're buying things from will take your money and keep you slaves to them. And that can create, a lot of unhappiness. And, people will chase things like homes, homes, better cars, better spouses, money in the bank, but these are all things I think that make people unhappy. And, it's not unusual for this. I mean, it's very, very common. And so I think one of the reasons that a lot of attorneys are unhappy is because they're constantly, comparing themselves to others, and they're caught up in this game, and because of that, they may not be happy in their lives and their careers. And you're always motivated to do better, to do something that's going to make you happier, more fulfilled. And it doesn't always work. When I speak to people, they're generally, when I'm speaking to them, they're generally looking for someone to help them. They're unhappy, with whatever they're doing. Most associates are in a lot of firms, and so they're looking for something else to make them happy. And so all this envy that people have, envying other people, trying to look good to other people, thinking about how you compare to other people, it puts you in a position, where you're unhappy. And if you're constantly unhappy, the most logical thing you can do is leave it. But you can't if you have debt and obligation. And the most logical thing what people should do is not have obligations, at least until they can get out of things that are keeping you enslaved. I had a funny experience. There was an attorney when I was practicing at my second firm, Dewey Valentine, and he was senior associate, maybe counsel. He was probably making, I don't know, $300,000-$400,000 a year, like quite a bit of money. And this was a long time ago. So I don't know what that would equate to now, but it would be, at least probably $500,000 a year. And he worked all the time, and he lived in a relatively inexpensive apartment next to the building in downtown Los Angeles, which a lot of people didn't live in LA at the time. There wasn't it wasn't a nice place to live. And he had this wife who would come in, and when he was there in the weekends, would cook like ramen for him in a hot pot, and so he could save money. And so I went in and I asked him one day, like, why are you, like, with all the money you make and everything, why are you having not spending any money? I mean, he literally walked to work. I don't know if he had a car. And he said, well, because I don't have to work here if I don't want to. And if I save my money, then I'm always safe and I can always be happy. And he was happy. So even though he was working a lot, he'd figured out kind of this loophole that a lot of people don't do. And he wasn't like really controlled by the firm, because he could leave anytime he wanted because he had enough money. And so he didn't have to worry about it in the same way. And apparently his wife supported it. But my advice to you is that if the work you're doing is making you unhappy, then you need to figure out something that you enjoy and makes you passionate and makes you happy. And it's just very, very simple. You don't have to practice law, or you don't have to practice law in the practice setting you're in. You don't have to be a slave to being unhappy. I mean, why would you want to be in something that makes you unhappy? Why would you want to be in a relationship with someone if that person doesn't make you happy? If it's just like a poor relationship, then what's the point? But people will stick in relationships for whatever reason. And if the people you're working with aren't making you happy, then why would you be working with people that don't make you happy? I mean, why would you go to work and be unhappy every day? Why would you work around people that you don't like? I mean, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but this is what a lot of people do. And if you are not happy where you're at, then you're never really committing to what you're doing. And if you aren't committing, then you're also never going to be really happy. I mean, you're always going to be seeking something that's different, and just wanting to get out, and your goals are just misaligned with your actions. I talk to attorneys every day, and they may have been at their current firm for 3 months and wanting to find something else that they think is more prestigious. They may go to firms and move every year or something, and continue to chase something. I saw one resume yesterday. It was absolutely incredible. The guy had a very strong background in patent law. He'd gotten like a PhD in electrical engineering, which is very, very rare. And he had had a series of jobs, like 10 of them, where he'd been a patent attorney at them for 1 year, and then he would leave, and he just kept going someplace and leaving, going someplace and leaving. And I think he was getting hired just because he was obviously brilliant and had really good skills. But why would you go someplace and work at another place if you're always going to be seeking something different? Why would you be in a profession where you can't commit? And why would you be in a profession where it seems like every firm you go to, you're unhappy? It just doesn't make any sense. And so, why do people, leave firms? Why are people unhappy? They're often, comparing themselves to other people. They're basing how they feel about themselves based on what they're doing, how they're compares to other people, and they became, bound. That became, bounded towards, to what they're doing. So why do people not enjoy practicing law? It's often because the pressure of, chasing shiny objects, being, imprisoned by it, or being in a cycle of envy that doesn't allow you to stop doing it. And so I think, if you feel imprisoned by your job, and a lot of people do, they feel very imprisoned, they feel like there's nothing else they can do. The most logical solution is to do something else. I mean, why would you constantly want to feel badly? So what is something else? It's often going to a different firm that with people that, match your the way you are. And it's often working with people that you like. So there are different firm cultures. Like every firm has a different culture, and those cultures are shaped by a variety of things. They can be shaped by the way the partnership works. They can be shaped by shared interests of the people that work there. They can be shaped by, the practice area you're in. They can be shaped by all sorts of things. But if you're not in a culture that makes you feel good about yourself and you're not happy, then you probably should never be there. It's not going to work for you. And you need to work with people that you like. And then you need to live in a way where you feel good about yourself, where you can, where you can be happy. I mean, it's very common. I mean, I'm sure you've noticed this, where parents that are the most successful have the kids that are often the least successful and unhappy because the parents aren't available. And so the children just kind of grow up in a way that isn't good for them. And so what is going to make you a good parent? What is going to make you someone that enjoys their life? What is going to make you someone that is going to live a long time and not die early? I mean, what are the decisions you make? So my friend Richard, that was an attorney, literally killed himself because he felt like he wasn't good enough anymore after getting disbarred. And my friend became was a serious alcoholic and very depressed, and following the Grateful Dead and everything. I think that he dropped out and never ever felt good about himself because he was comparing himself to his family and everyone he knew. The guy that did kill himself and getting disbarred, probably would still be practicing law had he not felt that he needed to steal money for whatever reason, for his own self gratification. And my friend that became the serious alcoholic, was very beaten down by his inability to compete at a high level. I'll tell you two more quick stories because this is very, very common. It's very common for people to get into competitive situations, suddenly not feel like they're measuring up, and then their lives will kind of go into a spiral. So this portion of the webinar I'm telling you because I'm telling you that how it happens and why people feel depressed. I was in a fraternity house in college, and there were maybe 15 of us living there. One of the people in the fraternity house was a guy from Oklahoma. He wasn't from a big city in Oklahoma, but he'd been the valedictorian at a small high school and had done reasonably well in his SATs and had gotten to the University of Chicago. And he got there and, he couldn't compete and got poor grades. And when he realized he wasn't going to have a future academically or be able to go to law school and everything like that, same thing, started drinking and partying and just kind of losing control. And then I was at someone's wedding or something and found out that, he'd gotten kicked out of the University of Chicago and gone back to Oklahoma with these alcohol problems and everything. And and ended up killing himself too. I mean, which when I first met him, he was a very happy, outgoing person with a very high self-esteem. And then when all this stuff happened to him, the same thing. He ended up killing himself. I mean, it's really not nice stories, but I believe that none of this would have happened had he not been in a situation where he felt like he had completely failed and was comparing himself, to others. So, you don't need to be the most successful really to do well. You don't need to compare yourself to other people that are more successful. You really shouldn't be quitting if you don't feel like you're successful. So I know that there's a lot of people on this webinar that feel like they should quit. They may feel like they should quit because they're unemployed or they haven't gotten the kind of jobs that they want, or they think that the firm they're at, the lifestyle they're living is never going to change. And so they feel like they should give up and maybe do something else, or they just don't know what to do. And and my point to you is that if you feel like you're in that situation, it's often just enough to work in a different type of law firm or a different type of city. That's very interesting. One of the things that I've also seen is some of the most successful attorneys I know are attorneys that actually weren't able to get jobs out of law school. Like they went to local law schools in Los Angeles, like Southwestern, and there's a bunch of them, and they came out of law school. And because they couldn't get jobs, they started their own practices, things like personal injury or immigration law or trust in the states, and became enormously successful, like much more so than people that went necessarily to large law firms. So there's all sorts of options that you can do and things that you can do that are different. It doesn't have to be starting your own practice. Sometimes, it can be going to work in the government. I mean, I realize that that's not safe, or teaching, or all these different things that may be a better outlet for your skills, and you don't have to necessarily compare yourself to others all the time. You need to put yourself in a situation where you feel happy and and also good about yourself. The other thing that's kind of interesting is that there's different types of legal environments you can go into, and different types of legal environments will require different levels of accountability. So it's very common, for example, for people that went to Yale Law School to not work in law firms. Like a lot of them don't. They go into like policy positions and teaching and things. And when they're doing that, essentially what they're doing is they're going into jobs where the government may have a lot of money to spend on people without a lot of accountability, which is very common in bureaucratic type roles. Or if they're teaching, they teach and they have to publish a couple law review articles a year. Or if they go into other types of positions, they're not as accountable, but there's people supporting that, or governments and things that have a lot of money, and that gives them a lot more security. And if you go to firms where there's not as much demand for the firm to make as much money and doesn't have to pay you as much, then you're in a position often that's much safer. So that's why attorneys in smaller markets often do much better and have longer careers than people that go to large law firms, where the large law firms are very motivated by how much money the partners make, where your salary is high and you have to keep up with that to be successful. So putting yourself in environments where you're more likely to be happy than the opposite is, very, very important. And it's something, that I think is, exceptionally important. I knew an attorney, and he went to, I'm not going to say who he is, but he went to like a top 2 or 3 law school, and he got there and just had, he got into a firm that wasn't the kind of law firm. It was a AmLaw 100 law firm, but not one of the best ones. And he got into there, and very, very smart guy. I mean, someone that probably aced the LSATs and had incredible grades as an undergraduate. And he got to this firm, and he took the bar once, and he failed. And he was at the firm and not doing that well. And then he took it again, and he failed. And then the firm, because of his academic qualifications and so forth, was like, "We'll give you a third choice chance," which is almost unheard of. But he wasn't working as hard as he should have, and then after he failed the bar for the third time or second time, he ended up taking like a 2-week vacation instead of committing and showing them the kind of commitment they wanted. So he ended up losing his job. And at that point in his life, he'd gotten married. he had a child, and he didn't have any way to support himself economically, but he decided he was going to go back to school and get a PhD in some of this discipline that he'd been very good at, and when he was in college. And he actually ended up having a really good career. I see him on the news and stuff all the time, and he's very, very happy. And so sometimes just putting yourself into situations that are better for you instead of doing something where you have no motivation, or really don't like it, and not comparing yourself to other people that went to these top 3 law schools and are working in big firms and so forth. So, the most important piece of advice that I can give you, and I know that most people do this, but you really shouldn't, is you really shouldn't worry about what others are doing, and attach your self-worth to what others are doing. When you look at people that are successful, a lot of times, I mean, I was watching this, I'm not going to tell you my political motivations one way or another, but I was watching this interview one way or, with, someone was interviewing Elon Musk and Trump at the same time, and both of them were basically saying, I don't give a crap what other people think of me. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, because everyone around them was, critiquing them and trying to create divides between them and so forth, and just all this bad press and everything. But they don't attach themselves to their self-worth, their self-worth to what others think of them. So one of them is president and the other is the richest man in the world. So you don't necessarily need to worry about what other people are doing. You need to worry about, what you believe in and what's important to you. Because if you worry about what other people are thinking, you're probably never going to be as successful and happy as you can be if you're constantly comparing yourself to others. And it can really hurt you. I mean, it can make you extremely unhappy and never happy. And it's just not good. I mean, you shouldn't be giving up or feeling badly about yourself because of where you're at compared to where other people are at. And it shouldn't make you give up. It should make you do something that's going to make you happy. And it could be practicing law, or it could be something else, but giving up is not, the dumbest thing, is one of the dumbest things you can do. I remember when I was like 18 or 19, I was talking to an adult that I know, like someone in my family that had gone to Harvard, and just felt like a tremendous, as an older person, tremendous unhappiness and lack, and I was like, why do you feel so unhappy? And he's like, well, because everyone around me is like governor, went to school as governors, famous writers and stuff. And then, look at me. So this just horrible sense of unhappiness and regarding not having succeeded. And then, the same person, was constantly trying to get others' approval by, engaging in this discipline that could, if it worked out, could make him very wealthy and well known, and just constantly trying to get recognition that way. And it never works. So it's in this cycle, just trying to get other people's approval and doing everything possible to do so, and trying to look better to others, even to the point where the person's like in their 70s and still doing that. And so I see people often just become very, very unhappy because they're comparing themselves to others, and they do it throughout their entire lives, and they never feel like they're good enough. And they're driven by trying to look better than others. They're driven by not feeling good about themselves. They're driven by, in order to get approval from others, working crazy hours and doing things that don't make them happy, having bad relationships, dying early, all these sorts of things. And if you know this is a problem that you're having, you really need to detract from it, and just you can't ever be happy if you're too concerned with what other people are doing. And so that would be my advice to you. So we'll take a quick break just for like 1 or 2 minutes, and then when I come back, we'll take questions. You can ask questions about anything I spoke about today, or any questions you have about your career. This is traditionally my part of the week that I enjoy the most, because I like hearing what people are thinking about, and then helping you make good decisions. The only reason I can answer these questions is I've been literally talking to attorneys about their careers several times a day for like a quarter of a century and doing nothing but this. So I've kind of seen a lot of career mistakes that people have made. I've seen what makes people happy and unhappy, and I always have advice about what people can do to improve their careers. So back in just 1 minute, and then when I come back, we can take questions. Thank you. All right, we'll get started. Okay, so the first question is, what's the best way to transition from a law firm to the public sector? So that's a great question, and actually, it's very easy to transition from a law firm to the public sector. So you have kind of two different options if that's what you're seeking to do, and I will say that a lot of attorneys that do that end up being very happy. So you have two options would be to work in federal government if that's something that you want to do. I think at this point in time, those sorts of jobs are not that are fairly difficult to get. But I'll just show you an example here. Let me use, I'm just doing the search right here in New York State. So what's interesting about public sector jobs is there's like so many potential options that you have if you're looking for, make sure I'm sharing the right screen here. If you're looking for a job in the public sector. So you have not only the federal jobs, but you have municipalities that are all over all over the country. And these are just an example of different municipalities in New York. You can sort them by the population. But most of these municipalities all have, if you go to the websites of them, will have jobs listed and for attorneys. Now, most of them are going to be public defenders and that sort of thing, but most of the municipalities in any state that you're in will have, some sort of jobs on their websites occasionally for public sector positions. So these jobs are often not advertised; they're just on the websites of the different cities. So I guess if you were to go to Rochester, let's see here, Rochester website. Let's see, Rochester, New York. The website. So if you would go to like this page right here, usually there's going to be, there's going to be some sort of, place where where these government offices will have jobs posted. So I don't know that they have it here. I don't know why. You probably have to find it. So either jobs. And a lot of attorneys are very, very happy doing this sort of work. So here are jobs in the city of Rochester. So they would kind of list their different jobs on this page. So I don't know what's going on here, but you would go and you would basically look at all of the the different positions that might be advertised on the website of the municipalities. And this is, by the way, a very smart job search strategy, because a lot of these municipal jobs are not listed. Here's another one, government jobs. That's interesting. So you can see all these positions right here. Sometimes they'll have, and I don't know if they have, let's see, attorney. There's no attorney jobs there right now, but maybe lawyer, insurance lawyer, nothing. But you would basically go to different municipal websites and search for jobs. I guess there are jobs on this government job site. So let me see here. I don't know what's wrong. No, that's maybe for Rochester. City of Rochester. So you would just go to, let's see, was that governmentjobs.com. But these jobs are, I mean, there's so many of these jobs, on different websites and so forth that, let's see, the attorney. So you can see here, I mean, these are whatever, there's, pages and pages of different attorney jobs. I mean, look at this, like over 10 pages of these jobs in this website. So it's fairly easy to track down these jobs. You can kind of see what they pay. I mean, some of them pays up to $150,000. There's just all sorts of different positions there for different types of attorneys. There, this tax group. I mean, any practice area that you're in, you can typically find municipal jobs. I like municipal jobs for people because there's typically, jobs in municipalities or jobs with the government. I think the government is USA government jobs. So yeah, USA jobs. So this is the federal government. So you can just do attorney again. I mean, even though they're laying people off like crazy, I mean, maybe there's some jobs. So you can see here, there's all these different sorts of jobs for people working in different branches of the government. And again, there's just an incredible number of them. So you have USA jobs, you have government jobs, and then you have pages and pages of attorney jobs. I had a funny conversation with a guy that I went to University of Virginia Law School with, and he was talking about he worked in a worked as an attorney for the Army, and he was saying that the attorneys there literally hardly did anything. And I thought that was kind of funny, but he had a good job and was paying over $100,000 a year, and he was in the same position where they were just kind of showing up to work and not really doing any work. So I don't know if that would make you happy, but a lot of the government jobs, what's nice about public sector jobs is the lack of always not having a lot of accountability. So when you're in a law firm, you have to have the hours, you have to impress, clients, you have to impress your partners you're working with, you have to impress the court. If you're going to court, you have to fight with the other side. And when you're with the government, there's really not as much accountability. The government's just kind of printing checks and sending them to people and or depositing your account, and you're obviously expected to work, but there's much less pressure many times than it would be working in large firms. And people actually have often, in my opinion, much more satisfying careers many times when they work in government jobs. So those two sites, I don't know what's called, government jobs and maybe as I talked over that, USA jobs. There's plenty of jobs in municipalities and also in the federal government, and it's not that hard to find them. I mean, they're listed in a ton of different places, and finding these jobs can actually often make you happy. I would say that the majority of people that I speak to that are working for the government, unless they're people that are different types of governments that were recently laid off, are pretty happy. I mean, they actually like the jobs. They feel like they're doing something valuable for society. There's not the same pressure and worried about getting fired that there might be in a law firm. The benefits are usually pretty good. So there's just a lot of very positive things about that. I mean, it's something that everyone should consider at some point in their career. A lot of times litigators really like these jobs because they can do trials and things regardless of what their role is in the municipality or the government. It allows them to do more trials, to have more responsibility. It often leads to positions in politics and that sort of thing. So I do, I think that that's a good question, a really good option, for people. Let's see here. Okay, so this question is, so with everything you said, would you encourage your child to go to law school? Well, yeah, so I have a daughter who's very, very smart. She just got into like the University of Chicago with early decision. She wants to actually go to Yale Law School. Is that someone I would encourage to go to law school? Probably because she's already more interested in public service type work than she would be in working in a law firm. So a lot of times people will go to law school for the wrong reasons. They'll go because they want to make money, which is usually probably the dumbest decision you can make. There are so many things that you can do that make more money than being a lawyer. So if your whole goal is to make money, that's not a good idea. I'll tell you a quick example. When I was in college, I met this guy and he had a huge house in Grosse Pointe, which is a city I grew up in and where I did a lot of this work. And it was one of the nicest houses. Even back then, it was like a multi-million-dollar house in the entire city. And he seemed to have a pretty good life because every time I would see him, he would be in a bathrobe and sitting by his pool or like tinkering with Ferraris and things in his driveway. And so one day I asked him what he did, and he said that he had all of these crews of people he paid basically minimum wage that went around and would clean windows around the city. So they clean them in the spring, they clean them in the summer, they clean them, and then in the winter he did snow plowing, and he was making a very good living, like over $500,000 a year, just sending out these crews at this kind of work. It was very expensive. He charged like $300 to clean some windows, and the people would show up, and he'd basically pay them maybe $25, and he would do this all day, every day, and had a very good business, and it was stressless. And so, so what do you do? I mean, you can do all sorts of things to make money if that's your goal, rather than go to law school. If you want to go to law school, you probably have to, really want that. I don't, if you want to work in a large law firm, or, work for large clients and things, then that's good. But most of the time, when you're an attorney, I think if you go to law school, your goal has to be, you have to be motivated to some extent. I mean, a great extent, by protecting other people and advancing their interest, rather than, and then also your own at the same time. But you have to be someone who gets a lot of satisfaction for helping other people with their legal problems. It's just that has to be in your DNA, and you have to think, it's going to be really exciting for me when I'm representing companies in litigation, or really exciting for me when I'm going to be helping draft patents or help someone with a real estate deal. I mean, you have to think, would I be excited doing that? So those are the type of people that should be attorneys. If you have that, sort of natural inclination and motivation, then it would be a very smart thing for you to do. Or, if it just really appeals to you. But for many people, it doesn't. So, but that would be one of the main criteria for going to law school. And then the other criteria would be just if you want to do it. So sometimes it doesn't really matter where you went to law school. There's all sorts of things you can do, start your own practice and government, all these different things if you want to be an attorney. So I don't think there's anything wrong with going to law school, but you have to have the personality and the internal motivation to want to help other companies and people, and to take sides in transactions and litigation, and all that has to excite you. And you don't have to be an attorney when you get out. I mean, if you look at like Barack Obama, like he came out of school and was an adjunct professor at the University of Chicago Law School, and then did some community organizing. Or you take a look at Bill Clinton, he did the same thing. He moved to Arkansas and became a professor at the University of Arkansas. Or you look at J.D. Vance, the current vice president, he came out of law school, and I don't know what he did, but I don't think he practiced law. So you can go to law school and don't have to be an attorney. I mean, you can do all sorts of other things, and the education is obviously very valuable. It teaches you how to think, it does all sorts of things. But it's not something that you don't have to practice law if you go to law school. And thank you everyone for that. These are great questions. Thanks. Okay, what strategies do you recommend for attorneys who struggle with perfectionism, especially in environments where the stakes are high and the stakes are heavily scrutinized? So that's a good question. So typically what happens is the better firm that you're working in, the higher it pays, the larger the firm's clients, the more the work's going to be scrutinized. So at the lower end, if you're doing work for consumers, they're not going to know if you made a typo or something's wrong with your legal arguments. Generally, there's not going to be a lot of scrutiny. So that would be just working for individuals in some sort of practice area. That would be the least scrutiny. And then as you move up the chain, as there's larger and larger clients that the firm's representing, there's going to be more and more scrutiny. So an example would be like insurance defense. So insurance defense typically there's different levels and prestige of insurance defense, but the majority of it is representing insurance companies that aren't paying the highest fees and want the work done cheaply before they settle the cases. And so they don't really, there's not as much emphasis on doing the highest quality work because you have to push things out the door much more quickly. Those jobs pay less, they're less prestigious, but as you move up the chain and you get to larger and larger firms, the work does have to be perfect because you're doing it for large corporations that can send their business elsewhere. The large corporations have general counsels in them that are typically from big law schools and big law firms that are very closely scrutinizing the work. And so if you're working in an environment like that, then your work is going to have to be perfect. And if it's not, you're in trouble. So you have to decide, is that the type of atmosphere that I want to be in? Do I want to be in an atmosphere where my work is always going to be very carefully scrutinized? I mean, you can, in a large law firm, like you can lose your job for making a stupid mistake. So like an example would be, I was in a large law firm and there was this woman that was like an 8-year attorney. And when you do certain types of discovery and you're giving discovery results to the other side in California, which basically certifies this the correct information and stuff. And if you don't attach that, then the information is whatever you did is deemed admitted, and it can just be devastating for your clients. This woman forgot to attach that form, and then when she forgot to attach that form, they ran into all these problems and had to go into, the whole firm got involved and fighting it because it was a large client, and she ended up losing her job just by forgetting to attach one form to some sort of discovery response. So, your work is and firms are going to be, very heavily scrutinized the larger the firm you're in, and that may not be the environment that you're in, that you want to be in. If you don't want to be in that sort of environment, then typically the way to avoid that is to work at firms where the clients are smaller and smaller and smaller. Because when the clients are smaller and smaller and smaller and have the lowest budgets, then your work is not going to be as heavily scrutinized. So, and you may not want to work in an environment like that. For some people, new attorneys, like that level of perfectionism is just not something that comes naturally to them. That level of perfection is not something that is, natural to them, or not something they're comfortable with. What happens in a lot of large law firms is people will start out there and they will make mistakes. Sometimes it's just typos and other things. Sometimes it's making mistakes in terms of leaving things out of contracts, or making legal arguments that aren't correct, that are based on old case law or precedents that aren't in the case and things, and will get a lot of trouble. So the larger the law firm, the larger the client, the better the attorneys you're working with, the more heavily your work's going to be scrutinized. And if you're not comfortable with that, there's all sorts of practice areas that you can work in where the work's not going to be as heavily scrutinized. I mean, divorce law is people do very, very well financially doing that. The work isn't heavily scrutinized because the clients don't know what you're doing. The same thing with personal injury law or other consumer-facing practice areas. So you just have to be, very careful about what kind of environment you're in, and just realize that the more the law firm pays, the larger the clients, the more heavily your work's going to be scrutinized. Just as kind of an interesting aside, like one of the it's very interesting, like with patent attorneys. So patent attorneys, it's a very like cerebral, like in-depth thing where there's all sorts of very complex logic and things that is followed, and a lot of patent attorneys and firms will very, very closely like scrutinize someone else's work, and if they feel like they've made a mistake, the person will often not just lose their job, but other patent attorneys will just kind of like say bad things about them in the community. And so you just have to be, very, very careful the type of environment you're in. Let me see. How can you stay competitive in a small shop versus a solo to prep for hire to, let's see. How can you stay competitive in a small shop versus a solo to prep for hire in a mid-sized or bigger firms? How does a small shop stay ready for acquisition rather than jumping out of the block? Well, it's a great question. So I'm working right now with probably, I would say at least 5 small firms or solo practitioners that are very successful. Like, how do you stay ready for an acquisition by a larger firm? You can do it in a couple different ways. You can do it by the most common way is to develop a book of business, meaning you have a bunch of clients that are, using you. Your business is generating a certain amount of money per year, meaning you might be generating 500,000 or $1 million in billings a year. And then you would take that and you would go to, this is what I do. I mean, it's almost like investment banking work. You would take, what you have and you would say to a mid-size or a larger firm that, I have all this work. It's too much administrative work for me. I don't like having to do taxes and payroll and manage people. And I would like to go to a larger firm that's going to provide me more support and a brand and the ability to do all these different things that I can't do on my own. So that when you make that proposition to other firms, they like that. And so they will often bring you in. Now, they're not going to acquire you in the status, they're going to pay you money, but they will take you in and they will give you an opportunity. And it's really not that hard to do. So, in most cities, I mean, there's hundreds of attorneys and small law firms that would probably do the kind of work you do. So being able to approach them in that way makes your firm acquirable. There's other practice areas that people do independently that make them very attractive to firms. Some of those are like trust and estates. Like, I'm working with several trust and estates attorneys that have their own law firms. Some of them like 1 or 2 years out of school, and they're getting interest from mid-sized to large law, mid-sized to smaller law firms that are hiring them and will give them a percentage of their business. I mean, and these are people that don't even have any training yet, and they just did something on their own. So, the practice area you're in will determine how if the larger law firm will want to bring you in, and so that that's pretty much the way it is. But most law firms, regardless of your practice area or what you're doing, one way to think about everything is when people reject you or they don't hire you, or when they do hire you, everything is a business decision. So the business decision is basically they look at you and then they ask, can we make money from this person? Can we make money from their existing business? Can we make money from the type of work that they do? If they come over, and can they work on our clients? Can we make money? That's the really the biggest calculus that a firm's making. Can we make money? And how likely is this person to make us money as opposed to someone else? These are all business decisions, and it says nothing to do, with you personally. Your ego should never be involved. People will hire you to the extent that they feel like they can make money off you, and that calculus will be. It could be your practice area. It could be your stability. Like, do you seem someone who's stable that they can make money over in the long term? It could be if you have business. It could be the practice area you're in, and maybe they don't have anybody doing it, or they don't have enough people doing it. It can be just all sorts of things. And then when you get to the best firms, how do we make money? I mean, we hire the people that look the smartest and the best on paper, and look the most motivated and the most stable. So everything is about can you make someone else money? That's really the whole calculus that goes into anytime someone's hiring you. So you just always need to keep that kind of in mind. You should never feel it's a hit to your ego or anything when you're not getting a position or someone's not hiring you. You have to always think like, how do I look like a good business decision to someone? If you have the time, it would be useful probably for everyone on the call to to search and look what like investment banks do when they're representing a business. When an investment bank is representing a business, and this is what I do for my candidates as well, they basically will say, here's this business opportunity. This business is doing this sort of work. And if it was able to be part of your business, or you would be able to acquire it, this is what we project, how this would help you make money, how this would be a smart thing for you to do. And this is how this business has been improving, or this is how this business is in a niche that very few businesses do that looks like it's going to grow. So investment banks are basically all about selling opportunity. And when you're applying to firms and you're doing anything, you're essentially selling an opportunity to someone. And a lot of times people don't realize that, but you should think about like how, if I was a business, how would I look at what I do and how could I make someone money? A lot of times when I'm working with attorneys also, one of the things that I like to do, but most people get spooked by, is I will send people job openings, and job openings are certainly a good way to get a job. But I will also send them like a list of firms to approach that don't have any openings. And when you approach a firm that doesn't have any openings, all the firm is doing is they're looking at your resume and they're saying, hey, can we make money off this person? Do we have work that's not being done that if we plug this person into the job would help us make money? So imagine, it's just so interesting. So you might have like an attorney that's billing $1,400 an hour, making, let's say, 400,000, let's just say 375, $375,000 at a law firm per year. And so if that attorney's billing 1,400 hours, and let me pull my calculator. So if that attorney's billing $1,400 an hour and is billing 2,000 hours a year. Let's see here, 2,000 hours times 1,400. That attorney is bringing into the firm, 2,000 hours. That equals $2.8 million per year. So think about how much money a law firm can make from someone that they hire for $375,000. That's like $2.5 million per year that person, it's essentially could be, it's almost $2.5 million that the person's can make per year. So even if the firm thinks we only have, 1,200 hours worth of work for them when they hire them, but maybe they'll have more, it's still extremely profitable. So, the idea would be, do we have an extra 1,200 hours or whatever that we think we could bring that this person could do? Because if we have 1,200 hours, let me just do this math. And I just want you guys everyone to understand kind of how law firms think and why they hire people without positions. And I'm just showing you this at kind of a high level, but times, what is it, 1,400. So even if you're billing only 1,200 hours, that's still 1.6 million, 1,680. And the profit still could be like 1.3 million. So, if you were a law firm, you would think, wow, I have at least 1,000 hours I can give this person. And what is that? It's 1.6 with a 12 and 1.6, 80 minus 375 is whatever, 1.3 million. So I can still make a lot of money off this person. So this is what law firms are thinking. They're thinking, do we have enough work to give to this person based on what we need to pay them? And can we make money? And you would be crazy if you were a law firm, even if you thought you only had 1,200 hours worth of work, you would be crazy not to hire someone that could do this type of work. I was working with a client that was doing investment management recently, and that's a practice area. And they were getting a ton of interviews with firms that didn't have job openings, but they were looking at this person's background and thinking, yes, we can make money. So you should be applying to firms that don't have openings, because what happens is they look at your resume and they think, hey, we have some work that we're not doing, and we can plug this person into that and make money. So that's just how law firms are thinking. They're not thinking necessarily like, we really like your background and things. They are thinking that, and they do have certain types of backgrounds that they need and they want, but they're really looking at everything from a business standpoint. So you can apply this logic. This is the example of someone working at an AmLaw 100 law firm as like maybe a 6-year associate, but you can apply this example to any practice area, in any location. All the firm's asking is, do we have enough work that we can plug this person in and make money? Or if we're acquiring this firm, do we have, and this, I'll just give you one further example. If we're acquiring this firm, do we have enough work to make money off this person? So an example might be, so say, you're an attorney, you have your own practice, you have 200,000 in business, and you do, just say real estate law. I was talking to someone like this morning. You do real estate law, and the 200,000, and then the firm want, and your income requirement maybe $250,000. Then this is how a law firm would evaluate you. So you want to make $250,000. You have $200,000 in business, which maybe occupies, I don't know what it would be, 300 hours a year. So you have $200,000 in business, and then you want to make $250,000. And this $200,000 in business is stable. It's something that you've been doing for a long time, and you've always had $200,000 in business, and you need to make $250,000. And then the law firm knows maybe that they have 700 hours of work that can be done. Which I don't know what's 200,000 divided, what's 300. I'm just figuring out this point, right? I don't know what that is. I don't even mind. Let's just say 200,000 business operates 200 hours. So 200,000 business, 200 hours a year. Then your income requirement is $250,000, and then they have 700 hours worth of work per year, which is 700,000 that they could do. So again, like so a law firm would be crazy not to hire you. You only have $200,000 in business, but they know that they have 700 hours worth of work that's not getting done, and that's going to generate $700,000 a year. Well, they're still going to make, if they, based on their projections, still going to make $750,000 roughly if they hire you. So, so this is kind of the calculus that all law firms are thinking in the background. It's not anything to do with you personally. It's just they're just making a business calculation. So this is how they evaluate it. And think about that. When you're applying for jobs, is there that logic that makes it profitable for them to hire you? So if they have enough work that outweighs whatever they're going to cost you significantly, then they're going to want to hire you. Okay, one of the most frustrating aspects of my career is that I tend to compare myself to other attorneys who seem to be moving ahead faster, which leads to self-doubt and the feeling of being stuck. How can I shift my mindset to focus on my own path rather than feeling inadequate in comparison to others? Okay, so the first thing to understand is that if you get out of law school at the age of 25, you roughly have probably, you have 60 years of practice law. You can retire earlier or something, of course, but you have about 60 years to practice law. So a lot of times people early in their career will get all hung up on prestige, doing things that don't make them happy, and then often drop out by the time they're 30, which is exactly what I did. But you don't have to really reach that conclusion so early. You've got 6 years to practice law. You have plenty of time to figure out what you want to do. I think my dad or someone said to me when I was early in my career, by the time you're 35, you should kind of figure out what you want to do. So you have about 10 years, from when you got out of law school to figure out what you want to do. So worrying about other people moving ahead faster doesn't really mean much. So sometimes people are slow learners, like it takes them a while to pick up on how to be an exceptional attorney, and they get it over time, but not right away. And comparing yourself to others is just not the right thing to do. You have all sorts of options. You can start your own practice. You can go to work in a smaller firm where there's not so much comparison going on. You can go to work for the in-house. You can do tons and tons of other things without having to worry about what other people are doing. I mean, ultimately, your goal should be to be happy with whatever you're doing, to feel, like you're getting energized. One other point I would just make is that, work should energize you. So, so you work, so when you work, it should get you excited, and work should feel like play to some extent. Um, so if work feels like play, then you're always going to be enjoying what you do, and have a good career. And people that enjoy what they do much better than those that don't, because they're more engaged with whatever it is they're doing, and they're just happier. So why would you not do something that sucks the life out of you, as opposed to something that makes you feel good about yourself? So you need to always put yourself in a situation where you're doing work that makes you feel good about yourself. I remember early in my career, there used to be this site called Greedy Associates or something, and the guy that started it had been a attorney, a cadwallader, and who just hated it. And the site was basically gossiping about law firms. And then I think Westlaw came in, um, and they bought it from him for, I don't know, not a ton of money. And he took the money, and he went to, I think, University of Virginia, was a really smart guy. And he took the money, and instead of, I mean, first of all, he started something that was his passion, which was gossiping about law firms. He did something that was really funny. I think they got him fired from Cadwalader. He figured out how to get into people's voicemail system, and so this partner was on vacation. He left this message, basically saying he was doing something, a sex retreat or just something very, very funny. And they found out it was him. And he left the message for when people called him. This is what it said. And so he got fired, and then he was always gossiping and things, and started this site, which he really, really liked. And then from there, he moved on to, I think he started a bike shop, and was just very, very happy doing that. And so that made him happy. Or, there's who's Tucker Max, the guy that went to Duke Law School, that had all these kind of salacious adventures and wrote about that too. And that made him happy. So you just have to do kind of what makes you happy, and it doesn't necessarily have to be practicing law, because if you're competing with people in a profession that you're not happy with, I mean, that just doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think people that do the things they want, and I gave the example about two presidents going to teach in law schools instead of practicing law. If you do the things that you want to do and that make you happy, you're always going to do better than people that are doing things that aren't making them happy. And it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, you need to be happy, or if you're comparing yourself to others, just realize that you have decades to find something that to practice, and to years to find an environment that makes you happy. Question is, how can I assess whether my current legal job aligns with my long-term career success, or if I'm unintentionally staying in a situation that reinforces my self-sabotaging tendencies? Are there any red flags that indicate I'm holding myself back due to comfort or fear of change? One of the things that you should be looking at thinking about your long-term success is, you should think about, do I admire the people that are advancing wherever I'm at? Do I admire the partners where I'm at, or do I admire, is there something that do I admire the people that are succeeding where I'm at? Does this make me happy or unhappy? And if it doesn't make you happy, then that should be something that you're concerned about. One thing I would just offer to everyone, like whether or not you're a law student or a new attorney, is the first 5 years of practice. Years of practice. First 5 years of practice are essentially training, and they're not necessarily made to be as fun. I mean, you're doing work and you're learning things, and it can be difficult in a lot of respects. So most people are not completely fulfilled. I mean, you're not going to have often a lot of client contact. You're not going to be doing the most important work. So, first 5 years of training should not give you a complete picture of what it's going to be like there. But you should be admiring people that are very competent and thinking, that is something you want to do. I don't know about comfort or fear of change. I think a lot of people they get very caught up in practicing law, and their whole identity is that way. It's interesting to me, like in my profession, like recruiters. Typically, when I hire recruiters, I'll hire people that are currently practicing law, often in large law firms, but there's not a ton of people that really want to make that transition because they're worried about how would it look if I'm not an attorney anymore. I'm like, I'm too committed to this and I can't get out. But a lot of times when people become recruiters, I mean, most of the time they're much, much happier than they were practicing law, but very few people will take that leap because they're worried about how that, how that could compare to others. So they're afraid of changing. So, if you want to do something else, you typically just need to rush, just do it. I mean, you just have to figure out a way to make it work. When I quit the practice a lot to do this, and rather than going to work in another recruiting firm, I just started my own, and I walked away back then from a job that was paying, and this is 25 years ago, so I guess probably the equivalent of about $350,000 a year now. I walked away without any substantial savings, but I'd figure out how to do it. Like if you want to do something and you change careers, you need to figure out how to do it. And you should go into it because you have a passion for it, not because it's something that you believe you should be doing, or you should have a passion for something. It doesn't really matter what it is. I mean, anything that you have a passion or interest in, if you have that, you're going to be successful. And like the guy I told you about with a bike shop. So, I find myself trapped in a high-paying legal job that I dislike, but feel financially dependent on. What are the most practical ways to transition to something more fulfilling without jeopardizing my financial security? Well, the biggest thing that you can do, you kind of have two choices. One of them is to just pay off all your debts that you have, or reduce your footprint in terms of your expenses to something that's manageable, or to save money and get and put yourself in a position where you don't necessarily have to work. If you have a lot of money in the bank and you're able to save money and eliminate your debts, then you have a lot more freedom. So as I said this a couple of times. I mean, I said it during the webinar a couple of times, that the biggest mistake people make is they tie themselves down financially, and then when you tie yourself down financially, you're always going to be dependent on others because you have financial obligations. So you need to be very, very careful about that. You don't need to spend the most money. You need to be careful and try to save money. I mean, I know a lot of attorneys. I have one of my best friends retired from being a partner at a major law firm when he was like 44 or 45, and literally retired. And he's been retired for 15 years, which is just as long as he was a partner in a law firm. And but he when he was a partner, he didn't live, he didn't spend a lot of money. He didn't buy nice cars or anything. He just had a very kind of decent lifestyle. And so he ended up leaving when he was that age, and is financially secure and still not spending a lot of money. And he had money in the bank that grew, and other people around him were buying bigger and bigger houses and nicer cars, and figuring out ways to buy second houses and all this sort of stuff. But they're all still working, and a lot of them aren't happy. But so you just need to, and most people can't do that. But you need to, if you can, you need to limit the size of your financial footprint. Many attorneys fear that leaving a high-paying position, even for something they might enjoy more, will make it difficult to return to big law, or another lucrative path where things don't work out. How realistic is this concern? And what are the key factors to determine whether an attorney can re-enter the traditional law firm market after stepping away? Okay, this is a really good question because it's actually, I mean, it's very important. So if you leave big law to do something else, meaning you go to work for the government, you start your own business, you do something like that, you will have a very slim chance of returning back to big law. And I'll just tell you why. Once you leave big law, whether or not you go in-house or whatever you do, that sends a message to other large law firms that you probably weren't happy, and the odds are you'll leave again, which almost always happens when people leave big law, and big law somehow gives them a job back. They almost always will leave again because there's something that they don't like about it. So you just have to ask yourself, who would you hire? Um, I mean, I'm just an example of someone currently a big law, big law, or someone who left for something else. And this is if you were like a large law firm, like who would you hire? So we look for something else. So if you were a large law firm, you would probably want to hire the person who's currently in big law because they're committed, skills are sharp, less likely to leave, all that sort of stuff, etc. So that's who you would hire. So that's just how large firms think, and they have a variety of people to hire because because they pay a lot in procedures. So this happens all the time. People leave big law and then they somehow they want to come back. A very sad story. I was working with an attorney maybe 5 years ago, and he had been at a large law firm. He went to University of Virginia, and he'd been in a large law firm in Washington, D.C. And then after 1 year, whatever this, he went to some government or lobbying agency or something, and he was there for a year and then lost his job because there were budget cuts or something. And he wanted to come back to another large law firm, but no one would interview or hire him because obviously they're comparing him to other second-year attorneys that have been in large law firms, and so obviously, who would you hire, especially like in a market like Washington D.C. where there's a ton of attorneys? Would you hire someone that left to do something else, or would you hire someone that was still there? And that calculation for law firms is pretty simple to make. They make it when you go in-house, all sorts of other things. I mean, I have candidates all the time and I can't help them, but they might have been like graduated from Stanford Law School and then been at like a top law firm in Silicon Valley for 6 or 7 years and gotten a really good experience and been experts in their practice area. And then they made the decision to go in-house and then decided they want to come back. And it's just like when they're applying to law firms, it's absolutely crickets. Like no one is interested because they believe that person will leave again. They can't compare their skills, so you don't know what the skills of that you're going to get working for some company in Silicon Valley. How do those compare to the skills you would get working in another brand name firm? So it's very difficult to get jobs back in the largest law firms if you've left to go in-house. Now that doesn't mean you can't get jobs in smaller law firms, which you can. But it's very difficult. And I'm sorry, back to the example of the guy that went to University of Virginia and then went to work after 1 year in a public interest, or not public interest, but a lobbying firm. He ended up not even being able to get a job in Washington, D.C. And the only job he could get was as a contract attorney for like a local, good mid-sized firm in Ohio. And when he was hired, they said, we never transition contract attorneys to full associates, and because of the role that he was in there, he was working at maybe half the salary of the real attorneys there, and feeling like very, very inferior because here he was, someone that had been in a large law firm. Now he was a contract attorney, not even Washington D.C. but Ohio. And so that decision to leave a large law firm for another practice setting can make it very difficult for you. Now, I will say that people often leave major law firms and then go to smaller law firms. And if you go to a smaller law firm after you've been in a major law firm, then yes, you can definitely transition back to a major law firm if you get experience in a good practice area. But yes, you can definitely do that. So you don't have to go to another big law firm to be able to get back into a big law firm, but law firms are businesses, and so they're going to compare. Do you have the level of experience and stuff that's comparable to other big law attorneys when you go to a smaller law firm, or is it different? But what happens in almost all recessions is that practice areas like corporate and things slow down. It becomes incredibly difficult to get corporate type positions in major cities, and so the people will move to either smaller law firms or to firms that are smaller in other cities. And then when the economy picks up, they are in very good shape to return to big law. So, but yeah, leaving a major law firm to go to another practice setting makes it extremely difficult to get back in to a major law firm, which is unfortunate, but that's just how it works. And just again, when you're thinking about this stuff, you need to think in terms of business decisions, like who would you hire if you were a large law firm? Would you hire someone from another big firm or someone that's already left? How do law firms and legal recruiters view attorneys who want to transition to a lower stress legal role but still be financially successful? Is there stigma associated with seeking less demanding positions? And if so, how can it frame a job search to seem seen as a valuable candidate rather than someone who simply wants to work less? Well, my advice to you is if you want to do that, you can certainly, go to less stressful law firms. I help people do that all the time. There are large law firms and mid-sized law firms and smaller law firms. But there's a couple points that I just want to make at the start, which is kind of interesting. So I was talking to a girl the other day who's one of my candidates, and she went to Yale Law School and was currently working at a big firm. And I had the same discussion with her. Would you like to work in a smaller law firm? And she said, well, my best friend went to work in a smaller law firm, thinking that he was going to get more work-life balance, but it actually ended up being the opposite. Like he was working just as hard as he was in a large law firm, but making much, much less. And so why is that? Why do some firms that you move to, why do they market themselves as lifestyle firms, but then in reality, the work is often the same? It's because, law firms are businesses, and businesses, are trying to make as much money as possible. So, law firms are businesses trying to make, so if there's more work will do it, right? So that's just how most law firms operate. So that's something to kind of keep in mind, that even if you move to a small law firm, many times you're still, at risk of having to work just as hard, but for less money. Now, there are some exceptions to that. So there are firms where they are very, very serious. Like they really, people there's hardly anybody who works more than 1,800 hours a year. And the workload is much less, and that's just how they operate. They're not completely crazy, but a lot of times those firms will not be representing the largest clients. So if you're working for smaller clients, then those clients are going to have lower budgets, and if they have lower budgets, many times you're not going to be able to work as much on them because the clients won't pay for it. So the hours are less, and they won't overwork cases or transactions, and you can work less hours. So how do you find those firms? The way to really find those firms, and this is something that also a lot of people don't like to hear, but you need to talk to a lot of different places, because a law firm's not going to advertise on their website that most attorneys work between 1,500 and 18 hours a year. That's just what they are. I mean, but you have to get in there and talk to them. So it's important to talk to a lot of different people. Now, there's something that kind of happens in the legal profession that's also important to understand. So if you're trying to move a lot of times to a smaller law firm, law firms are often suspicious of that, because they're like, why would this person move from a very prestigious law firm, and why would they work for us? If they did work for us, would they stick around? And are they leaving because there's something wrong with their work and they can't get positions with their large law firms? So you always have that to kind of come up against when you're seeking jobs in smaller law firms. They're often actually suspicious of you. They think if they hire you, you won't stick around. They think maybe there's something wrong with you. So you would think that it would be easier to get jobs in smaller law firms when you're coming from major law firms, but often it can be difficult because there's kind of that suspicion associated with it. But there are tons of law firms. I mean, in every city, all over the country, of people that left large law firms and started their own law firms because they wanted less stress. But that you have to talk to a lot of people to find those sorts of firms, and they're not very hard to find. I had someone the other day. It was kind of interesting. Like, she was a trust and estates attorney, and she has like two offers right now. I think one is for, or no, three offers. One's for $180,000 a year. The other is for 150, and the other is for what is it, for like 100, but with bonuses for hitting different targets. So the one for 100, the billable hour requirement's only like 1,200 hours a year. This is literally okay with them, and then they give her maybe for every additional 100 hours, she gets like $5,000 or something. But there are firms that have very, very low billable hour requirements, and that's something to think about. Another thing to think about for hourly requirements is there's lower hours often required for people in certain practice areas, which ERISA is one of them, tax law is one of them, patent's often one of them. So you can go into certain practice areas that are going to be much less stress and have more predictable hours. But yes, there's some stigma, but to going to less demanding positions, but there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's interesting in smaller markets and towns, like there's a lot of employment stability. So if you join a firm in rural Michigan or rural Wisconsin, the odds are that it's going to be much less demanding, and that there's going to be a lot less employment stability, and the financial success may not look the same, but your lifestyle is actually better. So the most common thing that I see is people moving from, like, for example, moving from New York City to Rochester, New York. So they might be making $280,000 or $300 in New York City, but in Rochester they're making half. But at the same time, they can buy a house. The hours are better, they're happier, they can be more involved with their family. So you actually, when it comes right down to it, you might be making more money when you're making half of what you think you're making in a smaller market than you would be making in a large market, and your hours are much less. I mean, I talk to attorneys all the time that in major markets, like, where their day basically is like that, they're in work by 9 and they're there till 1:30 or 2 every night, and they do that several days a week, and maybe they take time off on Sunday to do something. There's this guy that's a tenant of mine in a house, and he was interviewing. He was interviewing with a law firm in New York when he was at Columbia Law School, and he was like, I think he graduated, he said, like, number 2 in his class. So it was one of the best law firms in New York, and he asked a partner what he does, what he does to relax on the weekends, and he said, well, on Sundays I put on a pair of jeans and a t-shirt and I walk through Central Park on the way to work. Like, that was his relaxation, was coming to the office, not wearing a suit, coat and tie, and spending a half hour walking to Central Park. So, I mean, less demanding positions, you can find them, but the ability to be financially very, very successful financially a lot of times is, difficult. Okay. Hey, thank you. Your story about not getting hired out of law school resonated. I struggled really badly in law school because of the hard 1.3 of the class being academically disqualified from Southwestern Law in the early 2000s. And I graduated, passed the bar, and had to start my own firm after doing doc review. I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute, everyone on the phone or conference, and feeling like quite the loser in the law. I have since decided that I'm responsible for my own destiny, and perhaps I can relate to the notion that other millennia now feel they have to create their own path. Thank you for the compliments to your word. Okay, so this is interesting. So yeah, so I used to teach at Whittier Law School that since we're not a business, and when I would grade my students, I would get calls from them saying, if you don't give me a better grade, I'm going to get kicked out of school, which I felt really bad about. But yes, a lot of these law schools, like the lower ranked ones like Southwestern and other ones, will intentionally like flunk out a lot of people in the class, and they do that because the people that are at the bottom of the class, they're worried won't pass the bar, and that will hurt their rankings and that sort of thing. So so getting kicked out of law school, and it used to be very common, by the way, in large law schools. Like my own father was didn't have the grades he should have at Michigan Law School, and was told he had to take summer classes if he wanted to stay there, and rather than doing that, he dropped out. But yeah, so that's one thing to law school. But so this story about doing doc review for years and things like that with your law degree, I don't think personally that anybody should be doing anything like that. The first thing is that in every city, there's thousands of attorneys with small law firms, with their own law firms, and all sorts of things that will hire you. I mean, again, they're businesses, and so if they have work to give you, they will. That's illegal. So there's no reason that any attorney should be doing document review unless you enjoy it. It doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you do doc review when you can get a job in any city doing it's not hard. So I want to give everyone an example, because I don't this question is something, the kind of stuff that people ask a lot. Like, why would you take a position that is beneath your beneath what you're capable of doing? So I don't know where you are. You're in Southwestern Law School. So give me 1 second. Okay, so one thing would be let me just see here. So Los Angeles, or Google. So if you go to Google, oops, sorry about that, Google, and you search for, I mean, I don't know what you want to do, but just say you're interested in criminal law. So criminal law attorneys in Los Angeles. So if you look for criminal law attorneys in Los Angeles, you're going to see pages and pages and pages of criminal law attorneys. And a lot of these people are solo practitioners, and some of them are with small law firms. And there's just an incredible number of them. So why wouldn't you, if you wanted to keep practicing law, why wouldn't you, this is just an example, why wouldn't you reach out to Louis Shapiro and see if he needs help from an attorney, which I'm guaranteeing you that people aren't just contacting him out of the blue. And you have hundreds of these people. If you wanted to do, I'm just giving you easier jobs to get, but if you wanted to do immigration law, you could do immigration attorneys in Los Angeles and work for an immigration attorney. So my point is that anybody that's worried about getting a job as an attorney, you can always get a job as an attorney. There are incredible number of attorneys that anybody could work for. So you never need to do document review. You should be practicing law and learning a practice area. I mean, you could say you could apply to criminal law attorneys saying you want to be a criminal law attorney. You could apply to personal injury attorneys, to immigration attorneys, or you could apply to small law firms doing real estate law. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but you never have to do document review. And you also, by the way, you don't need to start your own firm. I mean, you can always get a job. Starting your own firm is something that I've seen a lot of people succeed at. I mean, a ton of people, but you're always going to be better off if you learn a practice area before starting your own firm, because someone's going to show you how to do that work. But no one needs to do document review. No one needs to start your own firm as a last resort, because there's always people that will hire you. I mean, they may not pay you what you want, but they'll teach you a practice area. And I always look at the first couple of years of practice, at least like the first 5 generally, is to get training in a practice area. Why wouldn't you want to get training for someone that already does it? And then you can start your own practice, or then you can move into a larger law firm. But what I don't like about document review and those types of positions is there's someone offering you something, and you can apply and get it. And they'll take the person willing to work for the least amount of money doing it. But why would you do that when someone can actually train you in a practice area and help you develop a skill that you could then start your own firm with or move to a larger law firm? It doesn't make any sense. And I think that people don't do the simple thing that I just showed you, which is you can just get on Google and search for people that do that practice area and apply to them, or you can just search for jobs in different practice areas and apply to those. But it doesn't do you any good to try to do something that you don't enjoy. Document review doesn't lead anywhere. Why wouldn't you do something that could lead to a career? And just people, I mean, what you do is extremely common, but it's not something that I would ever recommend. You should, if you're an attorney and you pass the bar, why wouldn't you be an attorney? Get it? But okay, have you seen success stories of attorneys that didn't go to top law schools and became successful lawyers in New York or another competitive market? Yes, I've seen people do it all the time. I was just yesterday, I was looking at resumes of people that applied, and I saw like one woman that went to like University of Florida, which is an okay law school, but was a partner in a huge law firm in Los Angeles. I see people that don't go to top law schools and do very, very well. I mean, when you get into a law firm, I mean, sure, they hire you based on your law school, but people are also hiring you based on your drive and your legal abilities. And the law school you went to doesn't always, talk to your legal abilities. Your law firms are social organizations, so your ability to do well socially there, and your ability to bring in clients, all that sort of thing. Yes, people don't go to top. I mean, they don't even go to, law schools in the top 100 and do very, very well. And they get into very large law firms if they try. Now, what's interesting is like people like, what does a law school mean? So I'll just, tell you what a law school means. The law school. So law school, so law student, 1 year, 2 year, 3, 4, 5, 6. So when you're a law student, the only thing employers that can evaluate you on, employers evaluate you based on grades and school. So, if you didn't go to the best law school and you didn't get the best grades, based on graded school. I mean, that's pretty much it. Same thing with, let's even talk about pre-law. So pre-law, it's just LSAT grades, pretty much that's it. And then sometimes, quality of school. That's it. So you're just being evaluated really on 3 different things when you're applying to law school. Then when you're a law student, employers are evaluating your grades at school. And then you get into like, practice area. So practice area, and then say you do finance. So you do finance. So, if you're in a legal market, maybe in terms of people in your class year, maybe there's 25 that do, maybe let's say big legal market, like 40. That's going higher, 50. They're there after 1 year doing it. After 2 years, there's 40. After 3 years, maybe there's 25. After 4 years, maybe there's 15 people doing it. And after 5 years, or even finance, these are people of your class year. Maybe there's 10. So when you get out of law school, like you're competing with, when you're going into law school, you're competing with all these other people, tens of thousands of people trying to get into law school. And this is all you're evaluated on. When you're a law student, you're competing with, roughly 30,000 people. I mean, we're roughly 30,000 people trying to get jobs in law firms. And then when you go to a practice area in a city, whatever the city is, now you're suddenly competing with 50 people. So that this number has just completely dwindled. So, 50, maybe out of that 50, you're going to have, let's say 30, top 14, and then, when you get down to here, maybe there's only 10 from top 14. So what happens, and then, the rest, 15, not top. So what happens is the more experience you get in a practice area, like the more valuable you are because you're competing with fewer and fewer people. So when you get to the 10th year, maybe there's 3 from top 15, the top 14, and then 7, no, that's, that's 7. So what happens is, if there's a job for a 5th-year finance attorney at your class level, it's unlikely that these 3 people are all going to be looking for a job at the same time. So if you're competing with them all of a sudden for a job, when there's a job maybe in this practice area, they're not going to be able to hire people just from top 14 schools. They're going to have to hire people from other schools that are looking for jobs. So the longer you're in a practice area, which you should definitely try to be in a practice area, where you're marketable, the longer you're in a practice area, the fewer people there are to compete. And it's very easy to move up. Law firms also like hiring people that may not have gotten jobs in the top firms right when they got out of law school because they're going to be more motivated and have something to prove. Whereas these people that have always been in top law firms may just kind of be tired, and it's just different. So people can always move up to better and better firms, regardless of the quality of the law school they went to. Well, some firms will hold that against your whole career, but you can always move up. And law firms like hiring people that are trying to move up. But the key is to, be in a practice area serving clients. I mean, or serving companies, basically, corporations. So as opposed to individuals, but you can always move up. So that's something to think about. It doesn't matter where you went. I mean, it doesn't matter where you went to law school, but people can always move to a larger and larger law firm if they get experience in a practice area that large law firms do. And so my advice is, if you didn't go to the best law school, try to get a job you could do real estate law with a small law firm. And then if you got that experience, you could apply to larger law firms after 3 years. And then you can maybe even apply to a larger law firm after 5 years. And people do this all the time, but you need to understand that you need to have a plan, because it doesn't, of course you're not going to you might not have gone to the best law school or gotten the best grades, or but if you go into a firm that does some sort of work for companies, you're going to always do well. I mean, I've seen people be at 3-person law firms doing corporate law in times when there's a lot of demand for corporate attorneys, and they get multiple interviews at AmLaw 100 law firms because there's just not enough people like them to do that kind of work. So you can always move up. It's it's definitely not impossible, and something anyone can do. But you have to be deliberate about what you're doing. So you have to be going into a practice area most of the time where that large law firms do. Large law firms represent companies and not individuals. Small law firms also represent companies, and they represent smaller companies, but you can learn the skills to represent larger companies and smaller companies. Often law firms sell candidates on perks and prestige, but I want to know what deeper questions I should be asking during interviews to make sure that I'm not stepping into an environment that will drive me into happiness. Okay, so remember again, first 5 years are about training. So, no one likes being in basic training in the Army or Navy or something where they're doing push-ups and running around in the middle of the night. But that's how they train people. And so law firms are the same way. They're going to train you by giving you a lot of work. They're going to train you by expecting a certain type of work, and you're just basically getting trained. So 25 to 30, you're getting trained. 25 to 30 equals training. Then that's about what it takes to be competent. And then, 30 to 80, 85 equals, practicing, whatever you're doing. You're practicing. So you shouldn't really worry. I mean, the thing that is very disturbing to me is I have candidates who are getting offers and stuff every week, and they're all hung up on an additional $5,000 from one firm or additional $10,000 from another firm. And so you should never be thinking all about salary. You should think about, what is the quality of training I'm going to get, and can I maybe enjoy myself while I'm getting this training if you're a young attorney. But perks and prestige and money and stuff is not something that, in my opinion, that people should be thinking too much about earlier in their career. because you're really just there to get training, and then you take that training and do whatever you want with it. You can move to a better firm, you can start your own practice, you can go in-house, whatever, but you should never really worry about money too early in your career. Now, the place you're getting trained can make a difference. Are you training with a very unpleasant place where the quality of work may be very high, or are you training with a place where you like the people and you're comfortable and that environment makes you happier? But I don't think perks and prestige are really that important. I don't think you should really think of yourself as an employee. So when you're early in your career, people tend to think of themselves as an employee, and you should think of yourself more as a student, like someone who's there to learn, someone who respects the people that are teaching them, all these sorts of things. So if you think of yourself as a student, it's basically you're getting 5 years of training as a student, and that training you can use to then go out and do whatever you want. But your first several years of practice are not about money. I mean, it's not something that should motivate you. Now, in terms of the training quality that you're going to get is better at major law firms most of the time than major law firms working for big clients than it is at smaller firms. And the reason is because the large firm clients pay a lot, and so you can go into more detail. I mean, you can do more research and things, and higher quality work's expected. All these sorts of things is expected. So you're going to get often much better training in major law firms than smaller law firms. But it doesn't mean that you can't pick up on this stuff and be an exceptional attorney without the training. So just think about your first 5 years in a law firm that's training. You may be unhappy, but you just don't trap yourself in that. During interviews, like the questions you should be asking. So what kind of questions would you want to ask to figure out if it's a place you like? You should maybe sometimes ask, like, is there someone I'm replacing? What do you like best about this firm? Talk to associates when you're interviewing and ask them, am I replacing anybody? And just figure out, like, if people there were happy or unhappy. But again, don't worry. If you're earlier in your career, you really shouldn't worry about perks and prestige. And if you're mid-level or even later in your career, you should be worrying about more about being self-dependent, meaning your ability to generate work if possible, or if you can't generate work, whether or not the firm has enough work to kind of keep you busy. These are great questions. Thank you, everyone, for asking so many questions. This is very impressive. Thank you. Okay, one of my biggest fears about leaving a large law firm for a smaller firm or for a different legal market is a recession that I'm giving up or not living up to my potential. When interviewing for positions in smaller law firms, how can I address this transition in a way that makes me an attractive candidate rather than someone who couldn't hack big law? Okay, most attorneys in smaller law firms would not want to work in big law. They don't like the demands. They don't like the how difficult it is. There is not a lot of security in big law. So unless you have a big book of business, you never have security when you get beyond 8 or 9 years. And as a matter of fact, almost the longer you're practicing there, the less security you have. So big law is very, very scary. You have to be able to be very good at generating business, or you have to latch on to a partner that has a lot of business. I talked to a partner this morning. He was at a major law firm, and there was another partner there that was giving him all of his work. And that partner left that firm to go to another firm, and the other firm that he left didn't want this partner that was left because they preferred to give the work to their own associates rather than another partner. So that's not security. The guy had been at the firm for like 6 or 7 years, and then all of a sudden, the person giving him the work left. So there's not a lot of security in big law unless you are someone with a lot of business or you're some very stable clients that you're working out for the firm. So when you're going to work at a smaller law firm, it doesn't have to be that you're giving up. It's just, a lot of times smaller law firms will realize you're interviewing with them because you don't want to stay in this path. Most people that go to large law firms do not stay in the path of working at large law firms. So you're definitely not giving up, and you have to do what works best for you. What I would say that's interesting is, if you go to work in a smaller law firm, you're more likely to have much more career longevity and stick with practice in law than you might in a larger market and in a smaller market. And then in smaller markets, it's kind of interesting. Attorneys are actually respected. Like people, refer to them as attorneys and they think highly of them, whereas in larger markets are kind of like a dime a dozen. But I don't think you have to uh, act like you're giving up to smaller law firms. I think you just have to say that this environment doesn't work for me, and often it doesn't. I mean, I was funny. Like I was interviewing when I was young. I was first moving out to Los Angeles. I was interviewing with this firm that was in the same building as another like major law firm, and they said, where else you're interviewing? And I said, I'm interviewing at this firm that's also in the building. They said, well, wow, I mean, you should think about that. Did you hear about this associate that just died? He was driving his car home at 4 a.m. He hadn't slept in 2 days and crashed. And I was like, I hadn't heard about that. So, and this was a kind of a mid-sized firm that I was interviewing with. So, for people don't necessarily, smaller law firms will not respect you because you're going to interview there. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Here, let's see here. Um, I'm an experienced trust in the states lawyer interested in working for Fidelity Charitable or maybe a smaller law firm. Does the Fidelity idea seem reasonable? I'm not finding jobs in this division on the regular Fidelity Careers website. Any thoughts about where else it might be? Well, typically a firm that's like the Fidelity would probably, if they had openings, would probably post their jobs on their website because large companies are pretty organized about how they hire people. But if you're not finding jobs there, then you could always send your resume to someone on LinkedIn that looks like they're head of the charitable division or something. But I wouldn't, if you don't want to work, if you want to work at this particular organization, I would say that there's probably a lot of other organizations like that you could be looking for jobs on. And but I would just contact someone that's in there in a position of authority and tell them that you want to work there, and then tell them why. I would also say for a trust and estates attorney, this by far is the most active practice here in the country. There are so many jobs and so many firms interested in hiring trust and estates attorneys. And oftentimes you're actually better off working in a law firm as a trust and estates attorney because a lot of stuff's happening in trust and estates right now. There's a lot of older trust and estates attorneys that are retiring. So they're interested in hiring people to potentially take over their practices, which is very interesting. So that there's just a lot of jobs like that, and there's just a lot of demand in the market. So you're often better off working in a law firm because you can develop clients and trust and estates without too much difficulty. And then those clients will be with you for decades, until they die. So, and they'll always need kind of work on their trust and estate stuff on a regular basis. So I would, recommend staying in a law firm if you do it. I mean, almost all the trust and estates attorneys I'm working with are getting interviews, much more so than attorneys in large law firms. How should an attorney effectively research and identify smaller law firms that will provide long-term career satisfaction rather than simply jumping from one unsustainable work environment to another? So the way to do it is, like I showed you earlier, you can just go through and you can certainly apply to jobs on job sites. Then you can, in addition to doing that, you can research firms in your market that do that type of work. So you would just go to Google and type in the practice area and something like attorneys or law firms, and then find those places and interviewing with. And then when you interview with them, they're always going to tell you, what their work requirements are. They're going to tell you about the type of work that they do. And when you talk to them, then you can kind of evaluate that if that's something you like. And so that's kind of how I would recommend doing it. And law firms each have their own culture. They each all have their own type of work environments, and so you have to decide if a given firm kind of works for what you're looking for. My daughter is 19 years old and graduates from her LLB program in the UK. If she wants to eventually come back to work in the US, would you recommend her going to a JD program with an LLM suffice? She wants to eventually work in international law and other public service later. So no, an LLM, this is actually a really good question. A lot of attorneys make this mistake when they're coming over to the United States to work. I wrote an article on it recently. I don't know if it's been made live yet. I think it may have been, but LLMs are a complete waste of money almost all the time if someone wants to come over from a foreign country and work in the US. The reason is because when you go into an LLM program, there's no real screening. I mean, the people, the LLM programs, I mean, there's different prestige levels, but for the most part, they're just ways for law schools to make money. Now, that's not always the case. There's some very well-regarded ones like at NYU and Georgetown for tax, for example, and some other ones. But in the most cases, they're just something where there's the grades, there's grade inflation, all sorts of things. If you come over and you get a JD, you have to take the LSATs and you have to be admitted to a law school. So that alone is very, very competitive. Once you get admitted to law school, then you have to do well there, and then you have to be able to get a job in a top firm. So people that go to get JDs from U.S. law schools tend to get far more jobs, like by magnitude of like 10 plus, than people that just get LLMs. I mean, it's much with a JD, you can take the bar in any state. With an LLM, you're limited to like New York, I think, and California, maybe Texas, and you don't have a lot of options. The other thing too, but you also have to think about if someone wants to come over and spend all this money and time getting a JD in the US, is that, when people think that they can do this and it's not too difficult. But, if you were, non-US citizen, being sponsorship. So, if you were a law school, if you were a law firm, like who would you want to hire? Would you want to hire someone that is a U.S. citizen or non-U.S. citizen? U.S. citizen is likely to stay in the U.S. And a non-U.S. citizen could leave at any time. So that's so it's very difficult. I mean, people do it all the time. It's not impossible, but let me just see. Okay. Yeah, people that are not, if you want to come over to the US and study, it's much more difficult to get jobs. And if you don't get a JD, then you're going to have a much more difficult time. If you get an LLM, it's typically not enough. Correction. My daughter is 19 years old and graduates next year from LLB program. She wants to come back to work in the US. Would you recommend? Oh, yeah, she should get her JD. Now, working in the public sector is much easier than the private sector. The private sector is more competitive because that pays more money, and there's more demand for people to do that. So, the international law is not a big area of practice. It's very difficult to get jobs in that. So she would, if she wants to do international law, that's going to be very difficult as well. So you typically, if you ever go look at job listings in the US, you're not going to see many international law openings, but you'll see them in all sorts of other practice areas. I've noticed that when I receive job offers, I immediately start focusing on the potential negatives rather than the positives, which often leads me to decline without fully considering the opportunity. How can I train myself to recognize when I'm engaged in this kind of self-sabotage, make decisions based on real career growth rather than emotional resistance? Yeah, so I mean, if you receive a job offer and you're receiving multiple job offers, I mean, that's actually very rare. So I don't know why you would be turning down job offers. Every job's going to have negatives associated with it. If you're a young attorney, I mean, again, your goal is to get training. You shouldn't worry about money or other things. You should only worry about the training, and that's the opportunity. The opportunity is training, not whatever, having to work in the office or anything. If you're declining jobs without considering the opportunity, then it sounds like you may not want to practice law, which is perfectly fine. You should be doing something else, because most people that want to practice law would jump at these opportunities and be excited about it. But if you're not, then shows you probably don't want to do it, and that's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. But yeah, you should. Your actions of doing that will generally, um, you know, show that you don't want to do it. Okay, let's see here. Uh-oh. I recently moved in-house to a large healthcare organization due to good relationships in the executive team, the potential to become general counsel in the next several years. Previously, it's very difficult to get hired back into a law firm, but my prior firm seems to have open to having me back sometime. Is healthcare a unique practice here regarding in-house moves, or are they likely just keeping a good relationship to good business? That's a good question, and the answer is yes. So healthcare is a unique field. There are certain things that you learn in-house that can be very helpful, and you can transition back to a law firm often. And there's things with billing codes and all sorts of things. Healthcare is a very active practice area right now, especially in some markets like Chicago, where there's a demand for people and could be coming from in-house. So healthcare is a unique practice area. It's unique because there's not a lot of people doing it, and many times working in-house does teach you skills that you can transition into a law firm, and you're learning about unique things that law firms may not do. So in-house is very unique. Healthcare is a very unique practice area. I saw one thing happen once. It was very, very funny. I realized how marketable it was. I had a woman that was her whole career had been working in-house in some hospital in Ohio. A decent size, and wasn't like the Cleveland Clinic or anything. As an in-house attorney, and she was moving to Colorado, and she got a interview with a law firm. And so the first law firm was it was before Zoom. It was a conference call, and when she got on the conference call, she had her husband on there, also asking the law firm questions. And I was like, "This is the craziest thing." But I'd never heard of anything like that. And she ended up getting the job, and that showed me at that time, like, wow, there must be a real demand for these healthcare people. This was years ago, like maybe 15 years ago or 10 years ago. But yeah, in-house healthcare companies are unique, and you can often move from in-house jobs into law firm jobs after doing it. The other one that's unique is patent law, because a lot of the work that patent attorneys do is transferable. So that's a good question. The answer is yes. It's a very unique practice area. How do you figure out what you're passionate about, whether you're practicing law or not? When it comes to practicing law, it seems pretty difficult to change practice areas because places expect you to have experience in those practice areas. Is it even plausible? An example would be going from litigation to non-litigation type of position. So I had a candidate not too long ago. He was first in his class from a top 25 law school, and was working as a litigator in a big law firm, like an AmLaw 100 law firm in San Diego. And he wanted to move from litigation to corporate related work. And we worked to try to find him jobs at other big law firms all over the country, and absolutely no one was interested in him. So the reason being that he wasn't a corporate attorney. So the law firms hire laterally, they only want to hire people in that practice area. So how do you move practice areas? The best way to do it would be, if you're in a large market, try to apply to firms in smaller markets that are going to overemphasize your education and a lack of people like you in that practice area to do it. So I knew a woman that was a patent attorney in Silicon Valley, and she dreamed of doing environmental law. And she ended up getting a job in a decent firm in Sacramento, California, which is not as nice as Palo Alto, which isn't nice either. But she got a job, and it's a smaller market as an environmental attorney, but she was able to move to a smaller market. So you can often move to smaller law firms. That's something you want to do, as opposed to staying in major markets. So moving to smaller law firms or smaller markets is something you can do. How do you figure out what you're passionate about and what you're not? Typically, people will have some sort of interest. I mean, everybody does. Might have interest in sports. You might have interest in whatever, something. And people will have interest or things that make them excited and things that don't. And whatever that is, you need to see, is there a way to turn that into a job? I mean, people do things like become attorneys and start face lotion companies because they're really interested in that. I mean, I see things like that all the time, or they start a restaurant or something, I mean, become successful. So there's all sorts of things you can do if you're not happy, doing, what you're currently doing. Let me see. I think this is the last question. So if anybody doesn't have any questions on this, wrap it up. I've been practicing law a very long time, and I really believe that legal education has to be reformed. As you say, law students exist in the climate of fear, anxiety, and constant adversarial competition. And law professors often engage in demeaning behavior that aggravates the issues. How do we change a legal education to be a healthier position? Well, I mean, I don't think I'm not an expert in this. One thing I would say is that, when you're a lawyer, your other side, your client is vulnerable, and so they have to teach you how to be vulnerable and paranoid in order to effectively represent clients. And so I think that's a lot of what they do in legal education, is to put you on pins and needles and make sure you're not making yourself vulnerable or to different ideas, because that's what lawyers do to one another. Lawyers are constantly trying to rip each other down, the opposite side of different things. And that's just kind of how the profession works. But yeah, it's definitely not pleasant. It changes people. Okay, well, thank you everybody for being on the webinar. Some people asked if this will be shared. I can send, I'll remember to send everyone after this webinar a copy of the webinar, the recording when it's live, and then I can also probably send the PowerPoints. So thanks everyone for being here, and I will see everyone next week. Thanks again.